We good? All right. Okay, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023 at 6 p.m. First item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us in the pledge?
I would.
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have any local liquor control board business, no local cannabis control board business. Order of agenda. Everybody okay with the agenda as presented? Looks good. All right, well, that will bring us to public comment. We'll start with people in the room and then go to people on Zoom. If you'd like to speak, please come up to the microphone, state your name and town or village of residence. Please address the select board as a whole and no personal attacks. And once we've heard from everyone in the room who'd like to speak, we will see if anyone wants to speak over Zoom. So yes, sir.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephen Pondre. I am returning to this meeting after my concerns expressed about the live amplified noise at Big Fatty's at the last meeting. I'm wondering about your progress. But before that, can I ask for an amendment on last meeting's minutes? Is that possible?
Last meeting?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's possible, but with the amendment be?
What adding to the minutes? The name of the establishment was omitted from my statement, Big Fatty's Barbecue, 186 South Main Street. And I did not ask you guys to consult the police chief whether it was legal or not. I wanted to know what you guys can do about addressing and remedying the situation.
Okay.
And that's why I'm here again.
Okay.
Mike,
Yes, Nate.
you need to run this stupid thing.
Oh, what's that?
You need to run this.
I actually don't. I'm afraid we could run it the cell phone. Yeah, you can just. Kim will just time. Sorry.
I don't know how to.
Okay.
In my to just jump in, my desk door, there are instructions for how to do the timer.
So it sounded like you wanted in the last minutes to amend it to put the name of the establishment in. Is that correct?
And correct my inquiry, which was asking you as the governing body of this town, what power do you have to address and remedy the noise nuisance coming from this establishment?
Okay.
That was my question 2 weeks ago. It's my question again today.
Okay. Gail?
Hi there. We actually have this on the agenda this evening. It's 5L. We'll be discussing it.
You will be great.
Yes.
So I can't stick around for that. Can I approach the select board? I have 7 solutions here to remedy this situation. And I also want to share a noise log from your Patties for all last year. I have a copy for you.
Yes, you can give us copies of that.
Marion Malley.
So we do have this on the agenda and we will review this as well. Is there anything else you wanted to state during your public comment?
No, that's fine. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the room who would like to comment? Hi.
I'm not very good at this, so if I screw up, just let me know.
I can do it on my phone.
I got it going.
Oh, okay, good.
Hi, Heidi Duto, White River Junction, Vermont. I would like to address the board. I wrote an email since the last meeting. I believe it was last Tuesday, asking about the planning board position. And I asked at the end of my email that either the chair or the vice chair, out of courtesy, reply to that email, and I still am waiting for a response. I would like to know, one, why neither of you had the courtesy of addressing my email, and two, I would like to know what we are doing moving forward with that position.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. I think that slipped my mind to respond, and I'm sorry for that. I apologize. Tonight, after select board comments, we're going to talk about our process discussion for advertising vacancies. We've had some thoughts about how to do that, both on our social media, on our website, and by posting to the Valley News. So we'll be able to discuss that a little later in the meeting.
I think it's very, very important that communication is transparent in this town with all members of the residency. Simple, I got your email, we're handling it. Give us a little bit of time. Respect both ways. I was very cautious in how I wrote that email, so I didn't show disrespect. So please, that's all I ask.
Okay, thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Dan?
And I'll just reply to that, that traditionally what happens is the chair has the first option to reply, and afterwards then other people step in. So I was waiting for that. There's been a lot of discussion as how that happens, and we have that on the agenda. So that's how we're going to address it.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Any other comment in the room? Okay, is there anyone on Zoom?
One hand, just, oh, two hands up now.
Okay.
Oh, were you addressing the room for comments?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Come on. Then we'll go to Zoom.
Yeah, my name's Aaron Warner. I live here in town. I'm also the regional reporter for this area for the Vermont Daily Chronicle, and I just had a couple of questions about something that was brought to me. My understanding is that the town has instituted a DEI training. Is that correct?
Yes, good. You'd like to take this one?
So we have a strategic plan for equity and inclusion, which recommends doing diversity and equity training for the select board and for administration and town staff leadership. However, we are currently not embarking on that because there was not full support from the board, and we had received a $10,000 grant from Vermont Community Foundation specifically to do diversity and equity work. And I went back to the foundation to ask them if we were to change our focus for training from diversity and equity to specifically diversity and equity to conflict resilience and board organizational development and strengths-based training as well, if we would still be able to use the money we were awarded, and they said yes. So we're in the process of scheduling a total of 6 sessions, which were outlined in the April 18th agenda.
So it's a parallel training. It's not diversity and equity. There's another name for it. Is that right?
There's another name for it. It all relates to equity in general, I would say.
Okay. What
But
is it that we mean by equity?
Are you here in your capacity as a reporter?
Yes, and as a town resident.
Okay.
I mean, you could read the proposals that were provided in the April 18th agenda.
Okay. And then I noticed there's also a safety review committee. Is that linked to the DEI? Are they related?
The recommendation for a community safety assessment was made by the Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion to the select board and was approved by the select board to proceed.
Okay, so there is a connection there. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. So
Also
the reason why I
relates to
asked is that
equity
these DEI trainings are like highly controversial around the country. In California, they recently voted on some of this stuff, and I think 60% of the state voted against having these. There's 60 to 70% of the students and faculty are reporting that these are making them uncomfortable. And in fact, there's lawsuits that are being brought against this kind of training for violating people's First Amendment rights. Are you guys aware of this? That this is happening with DEIs around the country?
In California? No,
Yeah. Okay. Is that anything that concerns the town?
does not
It
concern
could
me.
be-
So it seems like this is like a interview questions for, like, you would call up in your capacity as a reporter to ask us. I mean, do you have a public comment?
If he's asking as a student, if he's asking as a citizen, no.
I know, but I mean, I think it's kind of blurring the.
He say,
lines a
he
little
say yes as a
Well, I'm not
citizen.
trying to blur any lines. This is my first meeting. Is there a better time for me to ask these questions?
Well, no, I mean, you're welcome as a resident of the town. Usually when we get questions from a reporter for a potential news article, they reach out to us directly. But
I'm
Go
more
ahead,
than
you've
happy
got
to
your-
follow up with
you've
you
got your
guys
time.
directly. So my understanding is I was allowed to ask these questions.
Okay, continue.
But that's it. Those are all my
Okay.
questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Wait,
what, I'm not quite sure I followed. Wasn't our survey that we sent out for the town employees part of that funding?
No, that was part of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They had a program called the Welcoming and Engaging Communities Cohort. So 8 municipalities participated in that program. That was funded through VLCT and was completely separate. It wasn't related to the training.
So all of our training that we're having focused on diversity, equity, inclusion is coming strictly from Abundant Sun.
Well, it's not anymore. And basically the roundtable sessions that we had proposed for the board to do through Abundant Sun got changed because Abundant Sun reviewed the interactions of the select board. And it's, as a consultant and a facilitator, they acknowledge that it isn't their purview to convince board members that they would benefit from diversity and equity training. It was their job to do the training and not to spend their time doing it. So that's when they pivoted, and because we had participated in the cohort, which Abundant Sun was a facilitator for, so parallel programs, they said, well, what if instead of doing the roundtable sessions that we had originally looked at, we instead spend our time together looking at the culture of the organization as a whole and how satisfied the town of Hartford is as an organization, like basically just looking at how likely it was that members of the organization of the town of Hartford would advocate for this to be a wonderful place to work.
And how much of the money is a grant though? That we're,
The grant is $10,000.
and how much is town funded portion?
Well, the town paid for the Abundant Sun sessions because we had a contract with them.
And how much did we pay for those?
I can't remember offhand. It was something along the lines of about $1,200 per session.
And those were DEI training.
They were not the intended top subject matter. Like, for example, we did not come away from those sessions with a basic understanding of what institutional racism is or systemic racism and how that might relate to local governance and municipal leadership, that kind of thing. So everything relates to equity that we worked on, but it wasn't specifically, it wasn't the curriculum that we had originally set out to do. And I'm happy to discuss further offline, as always.
is there any more public comment in the room?
Comment on this
No, you can
conversation?
do it during your select board comments.
Okay.
Anyone on Zoom?
2 hands up at the moment. Let's see. Mike, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and board for all you do. I appreciate it. Mike Morris, Hartford, Vermont. Calling to ask about previous Zoom sessions. I used to be able to see everybody I'm talking to and everybody else could see that I'm even on there with the public, whatever. And then we had also live chat. Can I ask why we don't do that? It seems like it would be a great benefit and transparency and talking about things.
Yep.
I mean, I recall a long time ago, excuse me, I didn't have objections to it either, but that it was decided by whatever the majority was at that time to not have the chat because it was too difficult to monitor. So, for example, throughout the meeting, there could be 15 or 20 chat messages going on, but those weren't necessarily being seen or shared by the rest of the public. So in order for those to be part of the public meeting, they would need to be read aloud. And that was something that we decided was not a necessity.
Thank you, Kim.
That's my recollection.
Well, Am I still on?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, well, I've recently been monitoring the Quarry Committee meetings, and they have an open chat and monitoring system, and I don't, the chat is not my priority so much as that when I go to that meeting, I'm able to see everybody that is participating live or on Zoom. And I would appreciate if we could do something like that. I mean, Kim, you're in the Quarry Committee, very much so.
Oh, I'm not actually.
Well, okay, well, you were, but anyways, these meetings are Zoomed with everybody participating, and I can see everybody that's participating in the meeting. And I think that'd be fair to the public and everybody else to, you know, I mean, I can't always be there live, and body language speaks a lot when we watch people. So I'm asking if there's a way we can get that done for a little bit more transparency and open discussion. The chat, I'm 50-50 on, but to at least see who's at the meetings as if I was there live.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. So you'd like us to consider bringing back the chat and then have the Zoom video show more of the participants, it sounds like.
Well, the video mostly. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. What's the next?
I'm not sure I understood that, but okay. Marie, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to review, I looked at the minutes from the last meeting, and it said that I only said something about a survey. And I did bring up about the overflow haven parking to, you know, where are the overflow people going to go? I had suggested down by the tea house and or where the 25,000 gifts used to be there to have overflow parking of people go there. And that what really didn't seem to make the minutes. I do think we have to look at that. Where are these overflow people going to go besides the park and rides and other parking areas, which really aren't a good idea. Another thing was donating land, as far as the town donating land for some of these homeless to camp on. I've also heard something about a campground, and I have no idea what's going on with that or where that is. Maybe somebody could shed some light on that. And obviously the communication is a big thing. And Heidi brought up the job posting, and that is, yeah, that's a concern as well. And I also wanted to bring up Michelle Molesky, who's very involved in the town, and she really does seem to know quite a lot about policies and procedures. And I didn't know if there was maybe she could be a benefit of helping everybody on the board in the town come up with policies and procedures. Something that might be able to be considered. I know you guys have a lot to do, but she seems very good at that to me, but what do I know anyway? That is my 2 cents for this week. Any response on my questions would be appreciated.
Okay, and we'll make sure we get your comments into the minutes. And we'll, yeah, if we have any follow-up on a campground or anything like that, we'll certainly let you know.
So there isn't a campground that's being talked about?
Not to my knowledge, but Kim?
I mean, Marie, first of all, I apologize because I did the minutes for the April 18th meeting in Lana's absence, and I will admit they probably were not up to the standards that she usually does, so I apologize for that. And the encampment, the previous emergency shelter committee had been charged with the exploration of regulatory obstacles to supporting unhoused members of the community. And in that part, they did go to the planning commission and try to ask about, that for the encampment part, the committee went to various areas and researched different parcels that the town of Hartford owns to look at the viability of, Allie's got her hands up. She's probably more educated about this. So I'll let Allie finish that because there was an effort, but I don't think it's currently in process.
Thank you.
Let Ally answer that.
Yeah, Ally, if you'd like to comment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, along those lines, yeah, the ad hoc committee on emergency shelter, which is its charge has since ended. But as Kim was saying, one of the pieces of the charge was exploring regulatory obstacles to providing emergency housing. And one of the challenges, as lots of folks in our community have brought up, is where is a place where folks who may need to camp if they don't have an option can legally go. And so the committee at the time was exploring, doing a lot of research around, would there be an option for some sort of permitted campground, again, permitted that the town is aware that they're there. Would it be a planned development? What would be the right land for it? Close to public transit, things like that. So the committee did a lot of research over 100 different properties in town, and ultimately didn't find a solution that would kind of meet the needs and the intentions at the time. So that effort is not continuing in any formal capacity at this time.
Well, we still need to have an overflow. I mean, that still needs to be on the plan here of where they're going to go. I don't know what a piece of land to just have tents or campers go on. I don't know what it seems to me having these people in one area, especially what happened to Keith there, I think they're going to need to be supervised no matter where they are. And basically, if they're out living in a car and in a camper or whatever, they really need a porta potty, and that's another issue. I'm not sure what land you looked at. And when is that next? Is the emergency shelter committee the same as the homeless committee?
No, they're different.
Two separate? Okay. Can you put me on your email, Ally, to let me know when the homeless committee meetings are coming up? I'd like to attend those if I may.
Sure, I can just share it. I think I have your email, Marie, so I can email you as well. But on the website, you'll find the meeting schedule, but we meet the third Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
Any other hands on Zoom?
Yep, one more. Michelle, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It's Michelle Valesky. I'm chuckling here. Thanks, Marie, for volunteering me. I think that, like anything else, it looks like the select board is moving in that direction of doing a committee, or at least discussing it tonight. Thank you, guys. A committee on policies and procedures specifically for the select board. And I think, like anything else, they would, if they did create an ad hoc committee, they would have applications and interview people for that committee. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people in town that are a lot more qualified than I am. I appreciate your glowing recommendation on policies and procedures, but I just wanted to thank the select board for taking that up. And that's it from me tonight.
Thank you, Michelle.
That's it.
Okay, that will end public comment. We'll go to select board comments and announcements. Laney, do you want to start? You got anything?
I have nothing.
Rocket?
Yeah, I just feel like we're so distracted by all these things that are really not as important as paying attention to the roads. And that's my comment on the equity situation. It's like there's so many like obvious material issues that we need to address in our own town. And it's like the slow calcification of our government through committees and procedures, when it's like we're just not really paying attention to the real needs, like right here on the literal street. So that's probably my primary comment tonight. I see a lot of leadership here tonight, so just want to take the opportunity to thank you all for being here. It's an honor to serve this town.
I concur.
Okay, Ally? Anything?
I know that select board comments aren't typically a time to respond. I didn't have a comment, but I appreciate that perspective, Rocket, and I just want to say I do think about it a little bit differently. I think that these things are not, when we're talking about infrastructure and equity, I don't see them as mutually exclusive, but I'm hopeful that in our continued conversations we can continue to hash that out, and maybe we won't all see it the same way, and that's okay, but that we can find just enough common ground to move forward on that.
Yeah, but Ally, the cost of it is that a half
Yes,
hour
I don't want
spent,
to back and forth.
I understand, but I'm just going to
Okay.
respond briefly. A half hour or an hour spent on any topic is the same half hour or hour we can't spend on another topic. So there is a real cost to it. And I think we have repeatedly, consistently demonstrated a pattern as a select board that we are willing to walk ourselves off into a distracted direction at the cost of using that same time and energy, the same community attention and effort on much more pressing needs in town. So that's sort of where I don't think it's sort of a mutually, it's not necessarily totally mutually exclusive, but it certainly is not, I don't know, I don't think it's the way that you're presenting it, Alan.
Okay, Dan, any comment?
I'm good, thank you.
Jim?
I would like to ask the board, I don't know if this, would we talk about this, the liaisons reminding committee chairs to send their vacancies to Lana during the policy and procedure, or should I ask the board to do that now?
I think maybe why don't we talk about it during the appointments, because we're going to be talking about the process
Okay.
and the discussion of it. I think maybe that might fit in well there.
Great.
To add that as part of the process.
Awesome. Then I will postpone that comment. And then I guess I would just say I want to thank Chief Sheldon and the Department Officer Bennett did a really interesting ride along with HPD. Now that they're almost fully staffed, I felt like it was time to be able to take them up on that invitation, and happened to be a very, very exciting and challenging day. And I was super impressed with the department, as well as thank Jeremy and at the Public Works, here comes Chris, and Randy at the wastewater treatment plant for an incredible tour of the Whitewater wastewater treatment plant a couple weeks ago, as well as Evan for the tour of the Wilder Dam, and just fascinating stuff going on down there. And I was really grateful and impressed to be able to be shown around a little bit down there.
Toward the Wilder Dam?
I'm sorry, the Wilder Well. They were changing the filters that day. One of the filters
Certainly
that
digging
day.
toward the dam, yeah.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, I don't have any select board comments. So our next item is we are going to talk quickly about the appointment process. So as you know, we've had some concerns about how vacancies for committees are being posted. Some people have a difficult time finding out, what's open. So we've talked about ways to do that. One thing we've talked about is posting vacancies more prominently on the website, and on regular sort of occasions, posting them on our social media, the website, and with a notice to the validators. So if we can discuss, what we think would be an effective way to get news of the vacancies out, I think that would be good. And Kim did mention we have asked, and we probably need to reiterate, we want the minute meetings from the board meetings to have a list of the vacancies, or at least the officers and the terms. So, I mean, I'm willing to open it up if people have ideas of how we'd like to go forward on this. Okay.
So through an exchange with you and Dan and with Paula and Lana, we came up with a guideline to offer. It'd be great, so I'll share this with you. So I sent an email to all of the committee chairs and asked them to follow the guidelines of using the 15th of each month as a deadline. I asked them if they would please share any vacancies or anticipated vacancies on their committee or commission or board by emailing them to Lana, and include the name of the committee, the number of open positions, and if the vacancies are current or anticipated. And if anticipated, share the term expiration date. On the first and third Wednesday of each month, Lana will post the openings on the Hartford listserv as a news item on the town website and on the town's official Facebook and Twitter accounts. And then also asked to remind them to include on their meeting minutes the list of members, their positions, and their term expiration dates to basically increase the consistency and transparency of the vacancies. And so then what I was going to ask in select board comments is if if around the 15th of each month, if select board members could remind the chairs of the committees that they are liaison to make sure that they send any vacancies to Lana, that will help keep the process. And so when I was asked, is this official or just a suggestion? I said, because it's coming from me, it's a suggestion. If it comes from the select board, it would be an official procedure, but I can't form an official procedure.
Were you reading off a written document? Oh, sorry.
Can I go ahead?
Can you share what you have written? with us?
Sure, and I can forward it
Sure.
to the board.
That'd be great.
Yep. Lanny?
I'm a little bothered by this because you've already done this. And it's almost like if you wrote this to all the chairs of the boards now, it's almost going to be taken as policy now. And I thought we were having that discussion at this meeting. So I think in a bit you've overstepped your boundaries here, even if it is a suggestion. The discussion was to take place at this meeting, and then we would decide where we were going from that. So I think that's what needs to happen. I also believe that we definitely need to have this put into the newspaper in some fashion, whether it follow the agendas that are put in the paper or what be it. But all that discussion was to happen tonight and then be taken forward from there. I don't know where it is that you decided to do this or where you got that authorization from. The discussion to do this, whatever it is not amongst the chair, the vice chair, and the clerk. It's a board decision. And I'm hearing something totally different happening now.
So you mentioned, I'll get to that soon, adding an announcement to the Valley News, so other stuff you suggest for this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what I suggested last time, is to have the Valley News brought into this, to either have it at, a separate item or to be put in following our agenda that we publish before the select board meetings, have it listed in there what there is for open vacancies in the town of Hartford for committees.
Okay.
So that would be.
So that's a suggestion as well, to add notice to the Valley News. Dan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, this is not the first time we've brought this topic up, and we have mentioned it before and shared it with our liaisons, asking them to list the members when their terms expires and any open terms. As we started this discussion, I don't know when it was, 2, 3, 4 months ago. So this is not the first discussion that we've had about this, and I think that Kim just sort of organized all the thoughts and brought it up, and we are going to have that discussion now with everybody. So here we are in open session, but we needed to get some gathering and let people know that this was going to happen, so people weren't blindsided by it. So I disagree with that statement. I think it's been out there before. I think it's reflected in the notes previously. Some subcommittees and boards already are starting to do that. So I think it's just a reminder to get everyone on the same page to move in that direction for transparency at the request of the citizens.
Okay.
I apologize if I did step out but basically, if I should have waited a few days and sent it after this meeting, I apologize.
It's a board decision.
Yeah, and I wasn't making any requirements. I was just saying, hey, would you consider doing this? I should have waited a few days. I'm sorry about that.
So what we've got on the table is the sort of that you've mentioned, and Lanny proposes that we also have the Valley News print this either with our agendas or when the agendas are sent to the Valley News. Any thoughts on this, board? Would we like to go ahead with this as a recommendation? Kim?
I would be opposed to just tacking on the vacancies list to the end of the minute. Oh wait, the minutes are not posted on the Valley News, just the agendas. Is that correct? So I wouldn't be opposed to not having a separate post, or separate advertisement, but to put the vacancies at the end of each agenda that gets posted.
Okay, so that's an idea. Lanny?
The other place we could take advantage of with terms of social media is to have it in the Hartford listserv.
Yep.
And have it on our Hartford official Facebook page.
Yeah, I think that sounded good. I think Kim had mentioned that. So we asked the committee chairs to get their vacancies to Lana by like the 15th of each month. And then we will post the vacancies on on our webpage, on our social media, and with a listserv, yep, and then to the Valley News. Ally, you have a comment or question?
Sure, yeah, just to chime in and agree that with the various places that folks have already mentioned to post, I appreciate the idea of just having the, the 15th of the month or whatever it's decided upon, a consistent date where folks are sharing updates about committee openings. And the other thing I just wanted to put out there for us to maybe consider or talk about now or later is if we can think about how much time to allow applications to come in when there's a vacancy, because one of the things I've noticed is, for instance, if there's, one vacancy, then, kind of the first person who submits their application for it to get on a select board agenda is often, voted in, right? Because they're kind of the first application that we see. But I'm curious if, again, from a perspective of kind of equity and access and how long it takes folks to get information, if we could consider maybe a sort of somewhat standardized amount of time where we have time to receive the applications whenever there's a vacancy. So there's actually time to call and hear from more folks besides just like the first person who puts in their application. So we can actually get more folks in the pool too.
Yep. Lanny? Yep.
I think that's a great idea. I think 30 days is an adequate amount of time to be able to gather input from people and word of mouth. And there's no committee that we have in town that can't wait 30 days to have a member on their committee. So.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. Okay.
Ellie, did you just put your hand back up?
I did just respond to that, but I can wait if you have a direct response.
No, go ahead, Ellie.
Yeah, I was just going to respond and say, I think I would agree, Lanny, 30 days was something that I had considered. And if this is something we're formalizing in writing, maybe just something I'd add is, in the event that we don't have any applications in 30 days, which sometimes that happens, maybe there's a clause in our procedures or however we document this that, at the discretion of the select board, we can extend the application period.
Yep. Lenny? Yep.
I would think that we really shouldn't proceed with filling any position unless there's at least 2 applicants. The practice of just putting someone in because they've applied, it's been standard practice in the past. And if we cannot get, I've stated this in the past, if we cannot get people to show up and volunteer for committees in our town, we really have to question whether the interest is there for those committees. If there's not enough people that want to serve the town, why do we have the committee? We've gone through this in the past where we've beat a drum to try to get people to show up. And if they're not showing up, there's obviously not the interest that we think there is.
Okay. Kim?
Yeah, I agree with that too. Also wondering if it's reasonable to ask if where the meeting rooms are printed and posted on each floor of town hall, if there could be a printed list of current vacancies. If that's not too much to ask. Have any thoughts?
Out on the door?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a big deal. Yeah, it's not a big deal to do that. I don't know.
Well, I'm not asking you to do it, in all due respect. In any case, that's something.
Yeah, I didn't think you were. I didn't take it as you were asking me.
Okay.
I'm saying I agree.
Okay.
Yes.
So it seems like we've got some consensus on the idea of.
I'm sorry, I wasn't finished, because more importantly than that is we still need. What I don't know if we have is a real procedure for appointments of committee members, and maybe it is embedded somewhere in our documentations, but I just sent the board something that I sent to the chairs at the end of April, which is the town of Richmond's appointment process for doing committee appointments. And I think it's not an exact fit, but if we have potentially an ad hoc committee to look at policies, or if we're going to workshop it or whatever, like basically it's a template to start with to have, because ultimately what we need is not just these guidelines for how committee chairs make sure that the administration knows when the vacancies are, but we also need an equitable process for how to appoint committee members.
Mr. Chair.
Rocket?
Kim, I don't disagree with you. I sort of wish that, I mean, I can't help but agree with Lenny. It's like, we're getting these emails live in session. It's very difficult for us to be able to review and respond appropriately. And
We're
I'm
expected to do that in the meeting.
sorry.
I don't think we're expected to review the email.
Yeah, no, I understand, but if you're sitting on these materials, like, it's helpful for us to be able to come into a conversation with the opportunity to prepare so that we can have an informed conversation. I do also want to say there's a balance, because I hear you apologize that you maybe should have waited a few days to email the committee chairs, and I appreciate that acknowledgement. And I also applaud your initiative, and that's something I definitely respect about you. But I also want to ask Dan and Mike that, or just comment that, like, the two of you are part of that. And for me as a select board member, and I'm echoing Lanny's frustration here, for us, it's like, I don't disagree with any of the policy or procedure here in terms of like how we're going to implement this. It all sounds fine and good to me. But it does sort of feel like, I could imagine if I had sent something to all the committee chairs, ceasing just a couple of, the chair and vice chair, and it wasn't agreed upon by the rest of the select board, how that could be frustrating for people or alienating for other board members. And I'm definitely feeling like that on my seat, where I'm saying, well, I mean, does it even matter that we have a voice or an opinion on this? So nice we had to hear it twice. Thank you, Heidi. And so for me, it's just sort of, I do hear that acknowledgement, but I also want to point this out to the chair and to the vice chair that it's in my effort to be an engaged and involved select board member. It is important for me to feel like that these things that are going to go out to all the committee chairs, I get that it's just a recommendation and not a directive, but it does sort of feel like a lot of us were part of the process. So I just want to comment on that. And then as far as the policy goes, I mean, it all sounds fine, but it doesn't really feel like we can have a long extended conversation about it without some of these materials that are now just showing up.
I absolutely agree. Full disclosure, I clicked on all the links on every item of this agenda. I did not realize this openings process discussion. I skimmed right by it. I didn't even know that we were going to have a full discussion on this tonight. So that is on me, and I apologize for that. And so these are things, this is just like research that I have been doing along the way and been sharing, like,
Sure.
hey, is this something we want to look at? Is this something we want to talk about?
Okay.
The fact that we are in full discussion on it. I was going to, during select board comments tonight, say, could we remember to ask our liaison committees to let Lana know when their vacancies are. And then when Gail said, oh, we're going to be discussing policy tonight, I was like, oh, so anyway, my apologies for that.
Can
we just put the brakes on here a minute, okay? And just agree on what's been discussed as far as where it's going to be posted, and end the discussion at that for tonight.
Yeah.
All right, if we could do that and just move off from this thing.
I think we have consensus on having the committee chairs email Lana with vacancies, that we would post them on our website, on the listserv, on our social media, and with the agenda on the Valley News.
And the paper ones?
Oh, and the paper, sure, yeah, the paper one. I think we're all
Post on the door.
seem to be okay with that, right?
Well, if there's enough room on the piece of paper, depending on how many meetings we have, I mean, there may only be this much room at the bottom, so pending that there's enough room at the bottom of the paper, then.
For the agendas, you mean?
I thought you were talking about the room
Oh,
things.
yeah. Or it could be a separate piece of paper.
There's only one holder.
We can use
can
size
stick
3
tape on. I
Oh, my God.
mean, if you'd like for us to stick tape on, yeah, I mean, we can. I would prefer if we just have one piece of paper. If there's enough room, we'll put it on there.
I think that seems to have consensus. All right, so we'll move on to the town manager with significant activity reports. So Gail?
To be clear, though, before we move on, you're going to give 30 days for applications. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Well, I don't think we've developed a policy yet sorry.
Yeah, Kim.
I mean, I think I agree with that as well, but we haven't established a policy, and I think we need to establish a policy. When and how we do that, I don't know the answer to that.
Can we just agree on 30 days?
If we're taking further discussion at this point, I'd like to share something, which is, I like all the ideas that have been shared, but I think we need to look at some committees that have had vacancies for a year. So, if they have a vacancy for a year and there's one person that applies, do we wait 30 days and make them have to have someone who is running against them before we appoint them? And then I also wonder about if we have so few people on the committee that they don't have a quorum and can't approve their minutes, et cetera, and take any action. So that's happened in the past before. So those are two things that we need to consider as we move forward at a further date about discussing this topic.
Yeah, it sounds like there's further discussion on some aspects of it, but we can all agree on posting the vacancies on.
Okay, so posting. Okay. All right, then it's me. So first of all, I would like to welcome Brian Gazda. He is our new Public Works Director, and we will be hosting a welcoming gathering for him and also for Rick Vincent, who is our assessor who joined us a while ago, which I've mentioned a couple times. So please stay tuned for that. We'll welcome all of you and the public to come and meet Rick and Brian. A couple of items to note. The planning department has home creators. The expo is May 6th, so please follow up with them if you have additional questions. And then also Green Up Day is on May 6th as well. So if you would like to participate in that, please reach out to our planning department. And does anybody have any questions on any of the other items?
Yeah, not on this, but remind us again when the PD Awards is taking place.
May 12th at 7 o'clock. That's on a Friday at PD.
Thank you.
No? Oh,
I have 6 o'clock at Cornerstone Community. Okay.
So it is 6 p.m.
14 Elk Street.
Is that correct, Chief?
I'd have to double check. I think it's 1700, which is 5.
5.
Versus the 700.
I've got it at 6.
Can somebody find out exactly and get back to the board, please?
I will take it away.
Okay, Kim.
Do you want me to ask the questions I emailed?
you sure can.
Okay. DPW, any long-term solutions for the Bridge Street pump station getting clogged all the time?
Yeah, so the issue with that is we can't control what people put down. So they've been doing a lot of education and it seems to have been reduced. However, again, we can't control what people put down.
And then I wasn't familiar, I feel like I probably should be, I may have forgotten, but the restoration project at the town clerk's.
Sure. So a few years ago, we revisited all of the documents that we have in the town clerk's office and the importance of making sure that they're restored. And they had been put on the back burner for a very long period of time. The town clerk's office does have reserve accounts that are set up specifically for that. And we were starting to get the ball rolling and then COVID hit. So it kind of all dropped and now we're revisiting it and we're very excited about it. And we're starting to send out books and documents to start having them restored.
Are they being digitized?
Correct.
Okay.
And also being restored themselves.
Awesome, that's great news, okay. And then I'm guessing it was just a typo plan development. So
That is
yeah,
correct.
April.
Should say April instead of May.
Okay, and then when will we expect our quarterly?
May 16th.
Okay, excellent.
The question was when would the next
Okay.
financial update be? And that would be on May 16th.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Lynn?
Yeah, one more question, I'm sorry. When is the projected date for the town forest to be cleaned up from the logging that was done?
That is not an answer that I have, but I can definitely find out for you.
I would still like to take a walk through the town forest, but I want to wait until after they do the cleanup. We had this discussion previously in the past.
Right, and I believe that Matt, you and Matt had communication
Right,
as well,
but I
correct?
want to, yeah, but I'd like to wait until they clean it up to make sure that I don't point out things that they're going to take care of. So I want to give them the chance to do the job on it first. Thank you.
Rocky, did you have a question?
Yeah, just the HPD, the gigantic call volume, that's a consolidation of the last 4 weeks. Is that correct?
That is correct. We did
Okay.
not have a significant activities report
Right,
the last
okay,
meeting,
just wanted to double check.
although
on-
they are extremely busy, as we know, but
Of course.
Okay.
I sort of wonder on that, from the select board perspective, I feel like probably consistently over the last year, we've seen bi-weekly call volume around 400 calls a week, let's say. I think over time, like in a great like ideal society, you would have close to no calls because people wouldn't be needing that support. So I just wonder if there's an opportunity at some point for us to think about what is within the control of the select board that we can start moving our way towards solutions that would hopefully help over time trend downwards towards 0 calls a week. Or, I mean, it's never going to be 0, obviously, but in terms of reducing call volume. So it's sort of on my mind. It's something that I think about and just not really a specific question here.
Anything else for Gail on this?
Where's the hand up?
Okay.
Marie, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to, hats off to HBD, was very busy on Hartford Avenue this weekend. And we appreciate it. There was a lot of patrol there and just wanted to put out a shout out for that. And what the hell else was I gonna say? Shoot. I just lost it. What were we talking about just before then? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Significant activities, HPD call volume.
Right. Thank you, Rocket. And I'll read, maybe it'll come back to me. I'm so sorry. Thank
Okay,
you.
no worries, Marie. Thank you.
Mike?
Michelle has her hand.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Lenny, and
Yeah.
then Michelle.
I know that there's been a lot of work on Hartford Avenue. I hesitate to mention this, but I'm going to, because I think the public needs to hear it as well. We, as the town and town employees of the town, when we're in town vehicles, we represent the town of Hartford. And I followed a town vehicle. I'm not going to say what department it was. I'm not going to say what type of vehicle it is because I don't narrow it down too much. I followed a vehicle down through Wilder the other day, and it was exceedingly, I won't say exceedingly, it was over the speed limit. Yes, I was over the speed limit as well. If you want to give me a ticket, chief, you can. But I wanted to trail this vehicle and find out what speed they were traveling. And our town employees need to understand that we all need to hold the same standards, and we as the select board members need to be held to the same standards we expect anybody else in this town. And just to put it out for the department heads to let your people know, maybe come off the gas a little bit.
Michelle has her hand up.
Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
Hey there, Michelle Boleski, White River Junction. I had my hand up during the discussion about the committee openings. I don't know if anybody, I guess you guys didn't see it.
Oh, sorry, Michelle. I looked, but I must have missed it. Sorry.
That's okay. But when would it be appropriate for me to comment? Because I didn't want to do it during the public comment because you guys always say to do it when it's on the agenda. So
If you want to make the comment now, if you can go right ahead.
all right. Well, I just don't want to. Well, anyway, I sent everyone an email. And it was a screenshot of the Parks and Recreation Commission posting. And
Yep.
I believe it was on, I can't remember where I saw it, if it was on the official page, but I just wanted to I just hope everyone takes a look at that when you continue this discussion because I thought it was really, really well done. And I don't know if there's a format we can create a graphic that, or a template where people can just plug it in to make it easier. Obviously, I think maybe Parks and Recreation may have created this. So not everyone has access to the graphics. But what it says on there is it's really bold, and then it has like a nice graphic about leadership, volunteering, community. Then highlighted, it says currently there's one commission opening. And then underneath, it discusses what the commission does, which I think is really important and it's helpful for people. And then it also talks about what the commitment is. One meeting a month. And then it talks about the time. And then it shares about that it's available at the town hall. I also would suggest maybe adding the town email you know, where you can find the applications. But anyway, I just wanted to share that. It was just really, really well done, and it caught my attention. And so thank you for letting me interrupt your report, Gail. I apologize.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Gail?
So Tom Howell just sent me a message saying that the police awards is at the Cornerstone Community Center, and it is from 6 to 9. So
6 to 9 on
Thank
the
you.
thank
12th.
you, Lieutenant Howell.
All right, wonderful.
And then one last thing that I had, I'm going to be bringing to the board on the 16th, a request to temporarily close the Wilder Park and Ride. I've been in communication with the state regarding it, and they are in support of us closing it temporarily until we can figure out a better solution for that area. It's an area that requires a lot of attention and staff time, and causing the community a lot of anxiety. So I will be coming back on the 16th for a request to have the park and ride closed.
Great, okay. We'll take it up then. Thank you for the heads up.
Marie has her hand up.
Okay, Marie?
Go ahead, Marie.
I remembered.
Okay.
The police report. I just looked at that quickly. I guess I would like to see how many calls are in relation to the Haven up there. I mean, if you know where, not necessarily the amount of calls that you are receiving specifically, but also where they are located. I guess I think that would be a valuable thing to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Gabrielle?
Hi, Gabrielle Luke, resident, also a member of the Town Manager Search Committee. And before moving off of the Town Manager's report, I wanted to express the committee's thanks to both Gail, Paula, and Lena for all of their help in terms of giving the committee the support that they needed to conduct the community listening sessions that we did last week. Very successful experience being present for residents and stakeholders in our community, and we got lots of good information. The priority feedback that we got in all those groups will be attached to the minutes that will be posted later this week. But I wanted to just publicly thank the members of the team, and include Dylan there, and also the folks from JM Chico is also very helpful. But we could not have given community members the access that they did to the committee and really bring people together to have some really dynamic conversation without the support of the people here at Town Hall. So thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Okay, we'll be ready to move on to the next item. So our next item under board reports, motions, and ordinances, the GovHR compensation study presentation.
They, Katie and Rachel. Paula, do you want to do a little introduction?
So the town contracted with GovHR to do a compensation study for town staff. It is, one hasn't been done since 2011 for the town of Hartford. It was a project started by myself and the previous town manager. This evening, you're going to hear, you saw in your packets and also posted with the agenda for the public, the final, they say final draft because GovHR is very good in listening to comments and making changes or finding something that was missing or telling me something that was missing. But it should be considered a final draft. And Rachel will be, Rachel Skaggs will be giving the presentation this evening. And she is open up to questions. I did receive a couple questions from the select board this week after you got your agendas, but I felt confident that they would be best answered by Rachel.
Great.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get started. I have a short presentation that really just kind of goes over the highlights of the study Obviously, there's a lot more in the full report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Like Paula said, my presentation will be about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions after that.
Great, sounds good.
Great. So as Paula said, my name is Rachel Skaggs. I'm a Senior Vice President with GovHR and have been with GovHR for almost 4 years. Prior to working with GovHR, I spent 10 years in local government in Illinois, most recently as the city manager for Princeton, Illinois, and then worked for a few other municipalities before that as well. My primary focus at GovHR is classification and compensation work. So I enjoy this work and was pleased to work with Paula and the town of Hartford on this study. Assisting me, I have Katie Yee, she's on here as well, and she might chime in to answer some questions and was really involved in this project too.
Great.
So an outline of what I'll go over, I'm going to talk a little bit about the scope of work that was entailed in this study. I'll go over the process of sending out that compensation and benefits survey, putting together the proposed compensation plan, which really focuses on like the external market analysis and external market data. I'll talk about the implementation or how we recommend you implement the plan, future administration of the system, and then, like I said, we'll have plenty of time for questions after that. One of the first things that we do when we put together a compensation study is determine a group of comparable communities. We like to look at a variety of different factors that really determine communities that are most comparable to yours. So when determining comparable communities for Hartford, we looked at per capita income, population, equalized property values, total budgeted general fund and public works and highway expenditures, proximity, and then retail sales tax and use tax. So we take these criteria and assign a point value to them. Communities that are closest to matching Hartford's get more points, and thus a community with the most points is, deemed to be the most comparable. There's a full listing of how that all worked out in Appendix A in the draft report. We then came up with a cutoff of 60 or more points. So saying communities that scored at least 60 or more points are the most comparable across those 6 factors. So you'll see here the list of communities that scored 60 or more points. There's also asterisks next to some. Let's start with the bolded communities. And I'm going to talk about the salary survey in a minute, but the bolded communities are those that responded directly to the survey that we sent out. And then we also were able to get compensation data for additional communities, the ones with asterisks next to them. And that was from the 2022 Vermont League of Cities and Towns compensation report. So oftentimes when we're doing compensation studies, we prefer a direct response through that salary survey, but sometimes we have to use different sources to get that information to develop the compensation plan. In addition to that, we also were able to collect some additional data. Thanks to Paula's help with this, we were able to use the fiscal year 2022 market survey that was conducted by Lebanon. And these are some additional communities that we were able to collect survey data from for similar positions.
I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Is that Manchester, New Hampshire, or Vermont?
I believe that's Vermont.
No, I think it's.
It's New Hampshire, I think.
Rachel, that one's New Hampshire. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it
So
is.
it's just-
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. I'm not quite, I'm more Midwest, so I get a little confused when we get up there. That should say New Hampshire. So if that's, doesn't say that in the report, we'll make sure it does.
Great, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
It would actually be
So
helpful.
like,
Sorry, on that note, that whole column could use states. That'd be great.
sure, yeah. No problem. I mean, Katie's probably making a note of that, so we're set there. Okay, so we prefer, as I mentioned, collecting data through the use of a survey. And when we do that, we define each position to make sure that we're collecting accurate data, because we know sometimes a position title in one community might be different than a position title in another. So we kind of define the position to make sure we're collecting accurate data. We also review all the information that we get and make sure it's appropriate for the position. We prefer to analyze and collect salary range data because that's just a better gauge of what the market is as opposed to actual data, because when you get an actual salary, there's a lot of things that play into that and you're not sure how long the person's been in the position or anything like that. So salary ranges are always the preferred method. There are some instances where we have to evaluate actual data, and that's okay. It's just that ranges are preferred. And then all of the salary data that's collected is the current market for the positions. And then we also reviewed some benefits as well as part of the survey. Once all of that data is collected, we then put together the compensation plan. So for Hartford, we looked at two different percentiles, the 50th and the 65th percentile. I like to kind of explain the percentiles real quick so we're all on the same page there. When you're looking at the 50th percentile, that really means that 50% of the communities are paying more and 50% are paying less. When you look at the 65th percentile, it puts you a little above that. So that would, 65% of those communities that responded are paying less and the rest are paying more. So we kind of gave two options for you to look at there at the 50th and 65th percentile. I will share with you that a couple of years ago, a majority of our clients were really focusing their compensation plans at the 50th percentile. More and more recently, with positions that are hard to fill and just recruiting and retaining good employees, we are seeing a lot of people shift towards, a pay plan at the higher percentile, but it's definitely a choice for you to consider at any percentile. You'll see on the data sheets within the report, we show each position at a variety of different percentiles. But when we put together the compensation plan, we focused on the 50th and 65th percentile. You'll see that on table 1. So table 1 is kind of the summary comprehensive table for the non-union. There's a table 1 for non-union, police, fire, and public works. So that is what I like to call, again, the comprehensive table. Has all of the information kind of consolidated to one table. When you look at table 2, that is the proposed pay ranges that GovHR is proposing based on the external market data. And again, you'll see table 2 at the 50th and 65th percentile for non-union, police, fire, and public works. For each of those different employee categories, there's up to 10 compensation grades or ranges. And we take these bands and assign each position within a band, within their category. So administrative and technical, supervisors and advanced technical, directors and senior managers, and then town managers in their own grade or band. All grades have between a 5 or 15% gradation. And what gradation means is really the difference between each grade based on the market. So it's just taking one grade to the next grade and looking at what the market is showing that gradation is. And they vary between 5 to 15% based on the market data. And then all of the proposed ranges have a range spread of 30 to 40%. So, sorry, was there a question?
I do have a question about that.
I'd like to hold the questions till the end.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, and I can pull up the tables too, because I know that gets a little, I just have a few more slides and then we can go to questions and pull up those tables. And then the range spread is anywhere between 30 to 40%. So to get from the minimum of the range to the maximum, typically we see the higher grades be more like a 40%. And again, that's also to match the market. So I'll go through those tables. So when we look at each of the different employee groups, non-union has 10 grades. So it goes from grade 1 to grade 10. Police, we have P1 through P5. Fire, F1 through F3. Public Works is PW1 through PW7. Also, as we were working with Paula and updating this, we also recognized that a lot of these are, union agreements and union contracts. So we made changes to make sure that those are fluid with the contract negotiations as well. And then, as I had mentioned, we also looked at benefits, and you'll see that in Appendix C. Overall, very competitive, a few differences in benefits, but nothing really that stands out as too significant. But we looked at health insurance, dental, vision, and life insurance, VMERS participation, and then paid time off, sick, holiday, and vacation. one of the things when we put together these plans is we want to make sure it's something that you can use for many years to come. And we want to make sure that you can update it annually. We're also here to help if there needs to be updates too. But going forward, we always recommend that you survey those communities to see what their most recent pay adjustment is. So annually, you might just send out a quick email and see what their most recent adjustment is, and then adjust your compensation ranges by an average of that. Or you could also look at the CPI and just adjust compensation ranges based on a percentage of that. But it's important to look at the plan annually and adjust based on changes so that it's current with the market. The second bullet point there is what I just talked about, adjusting the pay ranges. And then the last bullet point where it says consider pay adjustments for employees. This would be, let's say you have a position that maybe is in grade 2, but you're combining or you're giving them more responsibilities and more duties. You might want to relook at that position, make sure it's in the appropriate grade. And if it does need to be changed to a different grade, you're going to want to consider pay adjustments for that employee because they have changed grades within the compensation structure. So there's kind of two things to look at annually, but you don't need to do a full compensation survey for many years. Just use this one, maintain it and update it annually so that it's current and reflective of the market. So that's, like I said, a brief overview. I will pull up the report and we can answer any questions at this time.
Great. Rocket, you got a question?
Yeah, I have several questions. Thank you for this presentation, Rachel. First question on the grade range. So that 30 to 40% range just means that the person at the lowest grade and the person at the highest grade, there's a 30 to 40% range between those.
So,
is that correct?
So actually, one second, I'm going to get to the table. So that's, let me share my screen again so we're all looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you look at, for instance, let's just take grade 1. So for positions in grade 1, we propose that the minimum should, at the 50th percentile, should be $45,250. And then to the maximum is 35%. So to get from, if you are an employee in grade 1, and you're brought in at the minimum of $45,250, you have the potential to grow within your position year over year. And then the maximum is 35% higher than the minimum. So that's the 61,000.
Got it. So it's a range.
One,
it's a range within each band at each grade, not across.
Exactly.
Grade. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. Good question. Thank you.
Question on CPI. This is something that came up last year. Obviously, CPI and at 9%, we're in an odd situation where we're budgeting with our, way in advance, and our salaries are often negotiated, way in advance. I do think personally, I'm of the stance that keeping people, our staff on par with inflation at least is the humane thing to do, because you're paying a real equalized compensation for work done year over year. But I was just wondering if you could give us advice on how you see that done in other communities and how we might address that here.
Yeah, great question. And we were in a unique situation when it was, up to 9%. I've actually seen a lot of communities since then kind of implement some type of compensation policy where they say, it has to be based on financial ability and the town's ability to pay, and maybe a not to exceed, look at CPI, but not to exceed 5% unless approved by the select board outside of that, or some type of language. So, you still want to look at that. You want to make sure you're adjusting your ranges appropriately, but you also want to have some parameters in place because you don't want to put the town in a difficult financial situation either.
Is that more common or less common?
To have a policy like that in place?
Yeah, around CPI, exactly. Something that would sort of automatically adjust with guardrails.
Yeah, so I would say more of our larger clients have a type of a comprehensive policy like that. A lot of clients just look at, what their budget can tolerate for that year, look at what other communities are doing, look at the CPI and establish a percentage every year just based on all of those factors.
So I
think it's important to make some adjustment, but you don't have to do exactly what CPI is showing. In some years, it might be the opposite, where maybe that's only showing 2% and you're going to do a 3%.
Right. Okay, and then the question here on this slide that you have pulled up. So I'm looking between the 50th percentile and the 65th percentile. If you just take the top band of the administrative and technical, that range 45 at the minimum, let's say it goes 45,250, and then goes up to 47,250 at the minimums. And on the maximums, it's about a $2,000 change bump as well. So the way I'm interpreting that is between the 50th percentile and the 65th percentile, there's less than there's a 3%, 4% difference in that range. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that's typically what we see, anywhere between 2,000 to 4,000, I feel like, is the number I throw out there every like 5 to 10% that you go up. So yeah, we're seeing, if you look at grade 4, it's about 3,000, 2,000. Again, we match that with what we see in the market, but it's typically between $2,000 to $4,000 difference.
So I just wonder this because within that, the ranges themselves are quite widespread at 35% maximum. But if the step increase between being at the 50th percentile at compensation and 65th is at 2 to 5%, let's say, that's being dwarfed by the actual ranges of the positions themselves, right? So I'm just wondering what the relevance is for us in some ways. I mean, if we're paying on the upper end of the 50th percentile, then we're actually going to be paying better than people are paying on the lower end of the 65th percentile.
Yeah, so I see what you're saying. But I typically, when you bring people in, you want to look at that starting percentage too, because the maximums are going to be higher over here. So if people are still at the higher end of the 50th, they have more room to grow if you adopt a plan at the 65th percentile.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Thank you.
Can you define for me where technical drops off and advanced technical takes over?
Yeah, so I'm laughing because I struggle with this question myself sometimes, but typically when we're looking, we make breaks based on what we see in the market. So you'll see for grades 1 through 3, those are about 5% different, or they are 5% different. So from grade 1 to 2 is 5%, from grade 2 to 3 is 5%. So then we see a jump, you'll see way from 52 up to 63. So that's kind of how we divided that and grouped, 1 through 3 as admin and technical, 4 through 6 as supervisors and advanced technical. And then this is also 5% for those grades. And then again, we jump up here to 78,000. And then there's a 10% gradation from 7 to 9.
I'm still lost in terms of how it is you can define someone as advanced technical versus technical when we have so limited number of employees in the town of Hartford.
So sometimes I recommend not because the titles, they're just, band A, band B, band C, but how GovHR typically, looks at it. So let's look at the positions in those bands, but we really are looking at the market and where that break is in the market, and then just establishing those 4 different bands. But if, the titles are not something you want to go with, it literally can just be pay group A or pay group B, because the difference is how they're grouped together with that gradation.
So Rachel, this is Paula. Can I just come in? One of the things we spent a lot of time on was job descriptions. And so every department had submitted job descriptions that we then gathered and we reviewed, because we had job descriptions from all these other, some of these other communities as well. And oftentimes when there was some confusion as to which band to put them in, we really dug down into the job description and compared them, even not necessarily in the same department, but compared where someone's technical requirements were across the town of Hartford, even with different departments. So a lot of that deciding and putting people in different bands came about through taking a deep dive into their responsibilities and their job descriptions.
So like say DPW, is an operator 1 a technical, and operator 2 is advanced technical? I mean, explain to me what you're saying.
I can't talk off the top of my head, but the information is all in here. Is that
so?
Correct?
Typically though, that's the correct, and like you'll see a foreman here listed under supervisors and advanced technical, and then the operators are going to be administrative and technical. So you kind of see that that separation, but thanks for reminding me, Paula. I know you and Katie worked really hard on looking at the positions and the job descriptions and the technical aspects when grouping them. But I think the big focus when we're looking at the compensation plan is what we're seeing with the market based what grade that position is in, and then the proposed ranges. I know that the headings in green here can sometimes take over, but really the important part is looking at the market data for that position and how those positions are grouped together within a grade.
But I guess my concern is that on a job description, are we going to label what category the particular job description falls into?
So typically what I would recommend is, I'm going to go back up to that other table I was on, down, I mean. So if you had a position open, let's say you had a position open in grade 4, my recommendation would be to list, grade 4 has a proposed range of this, or not a proposed, hopefully it'll be a range of 60,000 to 84. So you don't list this, you just list what grade the position is in, because that's really, really what matters.
And Rachel, you might want to just quickly pull up page 15. That's the Public Works positions, and it shows how they're.
Thank you. Yes. 1 second. Let me go back. Good. There we go. Yeah, so for Public Works, we have technical, you'll see the positions that are in the technical bands, 1, 2, and 3 down here. And then we have 4 through 7 up here.
Rachel, question on this while we're on the slide here. So just looking at the columns up top, you have the 50th percentile on the salary survey data and the 65th. If you scroll to the right, just off screen here, we have, I just see at the end, proposed salary range. What is the basis for that proposal of the salary range? Where's that coming from?
So that's coming from the market data and then applying that gradation. So
how does that differentiate from the salary survey data?
So the salary survey data is the data from all of the communities that responded.
Right.
So we take that data and then, some communities might have we see crazy things, 60% range spread or 20% range spread. So we take all of the data. So for instance, we look at that and then establish a proposed pay range based on the average of the data for positions within a grade.
Right. So how does that differ? So I'm just confused as
I see what you're
survey is versus market data. Survey data versus market.
So these columns, salary survey data, are just data entered over from, not to go too fast, but from these data sheets.
Sure.
So those two, and then way to the far right is what GovHR is proposing Hartford's new salary ranges should be.
But on what basis? Like
based on this data.
I guess
so
I'm
all of these data sheets.
I'm confused because if the 50th, all that data there, you created a 50th percentile level from all that salary survey, correct?
Correct.
But then looking over at the proposed salary range at the same level, 50th percentile, it's a different number. And I'm just wondering why that number would be different if that's the range of our cohort, let's say.
I think it's because they're looking at market data to try and establish a range, and the salary survey is literally what the towns are paying. But then there's a market range that you basically price a position. You use various data sources, and it says someone who's a HR consultant makes generally this much, and they give you a range between it. And that's all based on market data. The salary survey is what the actual towns are paying the people, I believe.
But what other market is there except the towns?
There's national market data.
That's
of wide variety of different sources.
Well, why would we use market data from towns that are just nationally when we're looking at, why would that be more relevant and the proposal rather than comparable communities, like communities that are comparable?
Yeah, we're not looking at this data is from the towns that responded that I showed on that slide,
right?
From the local data that we collected.
Right.
So this is all linked to those data sheets.
I understand.
So let's take, for instance, grade 8. This is all of the market data. Sorry, I know it's hard to see with all these.
I'm more confused.
Here's all the market data.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so then we take this market data, we look at what other towns are paying for these positions.
Right,
So you'll see what they're paying here at the 50th and 65th percentile.
right.
And then we create a range. We look at, the internal equity, the internal gradation between the other grades, and create a range. So if you look at all this market data at the 50th percentile, you'll see it varies from 79,000, 80, 86. Our proposed range is 83 to 117. So all of these positions in grade 8, if you adopt the 50th percentile, their new range would be 83,820 to 117,348. Based on kind of, again, that market data from the comparable communities, and then establishing a range for Hartford to use going forward.
So Rachel, is it fair to say that the market data that you're comparing to is by looking at not just one position, but it's taking into account all of the positions within a community or within a town?
So I just want to,
So
like,
it's
for instance,
all
let's
the
just take
all the
director.
grades and not just the positions. So that's a proposed range for the grade, which is cumulative of all those positions basically averaged out.
Exactly, yes.
Thank you. So that's a proposed range for the grade.
Yes.
Not, and versus earlier on it's for position. Okay,
So
thank you.
it's for all of the positions within the grade, but yes.
Got it.
So
Okay.
all these positions are in grade 8. This is their proposed range.
Okay, great. So it's all using the same data, just different way to look at it. One request that I would make of this, I know this is, I think one would be kind of easy, but it would be, I feel like it's a little bit difficult to read, and I feel like it would be great, first off, on this spreadsheet, it'd be great to see where we are as a percentile to the cohort. So
Sure.
you could add just to the right of the current salary, where is the town of Hartford within that range? Because in some cases,
Sure.
it seems like we're actually over, we're pretty high up, and in some, it seems like we're pretty low. But there's not an easy way to do that without brute force looking at each, comparing it back and forth. So if there's a way of doing that, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And then, like, even if you could color code cells for us, so we're the places where we're above 65 are green, and yellow would be 50 to whatever, but some sort of key or visual code. I think that would be a lot easier to interpret. Similarly, sort of at the top of this report, I felt like there was a good comparison of benefits between what the town of Hartford is offering to comparable communities, but comparing dental and vision, life insurance, but there wasn't really one on salary. And I get that there's a lot of different positions, but even just a really broad stroke, like explain it to a 15-year-old, you're doing okay, or you're way off track. Like just some real simple takeaways for us would be helpful at the very start to sort of frame the way that we look at the rest of the report.
Yeah, definitely. Great suggestion. So I'll tell you, and we can definitely summarize it in there, based on the data and looking at this right now, I would say you're definitely at least at the 50th. There's a few positions that might fall a little bit under that. And then there's quite a few, I think, that will fall above that, maybe closer to the 65th. But we can definitely summarize that in a column and kind of show what percentile each position is at based on the market data. It's not going to change the proposed ranges, but like you said, it might be a nice visual to see so you know where you are.
Yeah, that'd be great, especially because it might help us understand within a certain department, we might be way low or way high, and that might help us understand as a broader trend where we have room to improve and where we're doing well. So that would be appreciated.
Yeah.
And then I had another question, which is that all this data, I can appreciate that you've put in so much work to put this together, and Paula as well, just in terms of formatting Hartford's situation in. All of his data, though, is static, right? So it's a sort of snapshot in time with the last point. Got it. Obviously, we live in a time where everything is always changing. I'm wondering, for ourselves as Hartford, it's going to be prohibitively expensive to be able to do this, re-up this every year. What are some tips or tricks that you could give us in terms of how much of it is do we look over at our neighbors and compare versus how much of it is we just offer what we offer and we do the best that we can within our town versus some other tip that you might have for us to be moving forward in a way?
Good question. So I always say, we want this to be a plan you can use for many years. So you should not have to do another study like this at least for 5 to 10 more years. It is a snapshot of the market right now, but as long as you maintain these ranges, decide on a percentile you want to be at, adopt a plan, and then maintain those ranges every year. You don't have to do a full survey or a full study again for at least another 5 to 10 years.
Okay, and then, I'm sorry, I have so many questions. Going back to section 2, salary and benefit data, subsection A, there's a table here with the total possible points you use to sort of like rate the communities to see how comparable they were to Hartford.
Yes.
It's on page 3.
This one.
Sure, yeah, but if you actually go up to the pros section, I think it's easier to sort of see.
I'm sorry, what section?
It's salary and benefit data. It's just section 2. It's like 2 pages after the table of contents, 3 pages after.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
Way up
Okay.
top. Yeah, so we scroll down a little bit. There's a sort of a very clear.
Sorry, one second. My computer is being touchy. Okay. Oh my goodness. It's not letting me scroll. Just a second.
If you can just maybe zoom out, I can read them if it gets.
There we go.
Yeah, so right down there, the criterion with the possible points.
Yep.
So my understanding of this is just used to rate the different communities to how similar are they to Hartford. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Now, when you did this and each of these communities were given a rating, did those weights get applied to the ranges? The salary ranges?
No.
Okay, so
nope.
The salary ranges were calculated at sort of an equal level across.
Correct.
So because with that, and so this is just really, this criterion is just for us to interpret as we would, however we see fit. Okay, got a 64. Okay, got a 42 to decide how accurate that actually is to our town, or comparable it is to our town. Is that correct?
So we established a cutoff of 60 or more points, saying those are the communities most comparable. We did incorporate some other communities that were kind of outside of that because we had data. But
Right.
If you'll see here on page, what page I'm on, but here's all the communities that we kind of screened to begin with, and you'll see, some scored up in the 80s, some scored way down 22 points. So then on the next page, we, again, applying all those criteria, said here are the communities most comparable, the ones that scored 60 or more points.
Right.
So we didn't apply any weight after that. We just asked for their data or collected their data and then used the market data for those communities. But we didn't collect market data for, communities that are scoring way less than 60 because they wouldn't be comparable based on these criteria.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that. This just leads me to the question, which I don't know how you would feel about, but I would love for our town to have access to the underlying Excel sheet so that maybe if we have people who are statistically inclined in our community could play around with the weights. Because looking at this, for example, I felt like for example, I feel in some ways that the distance or the proximity factor should matter maybe in some ways less than across borders, right? Because we're applying, we're operating under Vermont state laws versus Manchester, New Hampshire, which is much closer than Burlington. Is it? It feels closer than Burlington. But they're obviously having to operate under a different set of rules. So is there a way that we can get the underlying model? Or
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we share, and I will make sure Paula has access to that and how we calculate that. I will tell you, and a lot of times we change out, or we have, changed out one criteria or swapped it out. It typically doesn't change the overall set of comps unless you change multiple ones. But, I'm a numbers person, so I can appreciate anyone else that is too.
Cool. Thank you.
That.
Okay.
Rachel, thanks. I feel silly if I should know the answer to this from the narrative, but in that table 1, I can't tell what are the color coding for the red and green numbers. Like it's not just red ones are
Higher or
less
lower
than
than, higher or lower than the
No, they're not.
50%. It's up.
From the, wait, well.
So looking at the
Yeah, higher or lower.
Sorry, there's one I noticed that is colored and it shouldn't be, but a majority of the green are ones that are below the proposed minimum and reds are above the proposed maximum for the 50th. But I did notice there's one in there that is a color that should just be black.
Okay, I think I might have seen that, but I also think I was looking at them compared to the current, so that's the current salary compared to the proposed. That's what I was just saying.
Yep.
But
So
like,
it's just showing, and that kind of goes back to the, percentile question below. Ones in red are above what we're proposing at the 50th. And then green are below the minimum. So our typical recommendation too, which I forgot to hit on this, would be, once you decide to implement one of these, anyone that's being paid below the minimum of the proposed salary should be brought to the minimum as soon as possible. We would never recommend a pay reduction for anyone that's over the maximum. So if there is someone in red, they're over the proposed pay range that we're proposing, that doesn't mean give them a pay cut. That just means, you can continue to give them increases or bonuses outside of the range. But if you were to replace that position, or if that person retires, you bring someone else in, you really want to make sure they're within the proposed range for the market.
Okay, and forgive me. So let's just look at that first one, the 108,056 in the current. So that is, it's less than the 65th percentile, but not, more than the.
Right. So that person is being paid more than the 50th. So these red and green are only applied to the 50th.
Okay.
So it might change a little when you look at the 65th. So if you were to adopt the 65th percentile, that 108 would be within the proposed range. So that would not be red anymore.
All right. Okay. That's great. I appreciate that. I can take that. And then how, I know we don't currently have a position of an assistant town manager. Is in the data you collected, would you have information on that position from the towns that you looked at?
So I don't believe Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, we didn't collect any data on that position, right? Okay. So, but
No,
what we
that's
would
not a
recommend
position.
doing, if you did want, that position, you would, kind of look at the job description, look at those technical components, figure out what grade it fits appropriately in, and then you would have the same proposed range. So for instance, if that was a position you wanted to bring in, and you look at the job description, look at, and say, okay, it fits good in grade 8 or 9 or 7, then it's going to have the same proposed range as that grade.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you. I think that was, I guess, this is a question I think more for Gail and Paula maybe, but and I know that it was the former town manager that originally contracted for this study, but how do you think this will just be a tool for then, is it going to be used to make any proposed changes now, or just in the regular budget cycle, it will be sort of a resource to use for determining those amounts? Like, how will it be used? Sorry.
So currently the way we're using it is to plan for FY24 and salary increases. So I am looking at where everyone is. I'm looking at where they are currently. I'm looking at where they fit on the new bands. I'm looking at length of service to try and see if people are where they should be, and to also, bring people up, get everyone right-sized first of all. And then once we know where people are in considering salary increases and the cost of salary increases. So first, if it's appropriate, and second of all, the cost of it, I put together that information and share it with Gail for her consideration.
And it's not, I think it's referenced that the 50th percentile or the 65th percentile is sort of a philosophical discussion that the select board determines, but we've also already set the fiscal year 24 budget. So the salaries would have already been set for that, right? I guess I'm not understanding how they would change.
Right, so the budget for FY24 is approved. However, we do find that it is important that we bring everybody up to where they need to be. And that'll be a discussion that we have with department heads to find if they have areas in their current budget that they have that they would like to make adjustments to ensure that their staff are brought to where they need to be. That's a decision that they can make within their operating budget.
Okay, thank you. And do you know if any of you know if the Vermont, the compensation and benefits report, that doesn't happen every year, does it? Do you know how often this does every year? So we do have, anyone wants access to this, and that does have all the, not all, but all the participating cities and towns in the statewide compensation report. But I mean, I think I mentioned that because I think a way to continually do this is for Hartford to participate in that compensation report, which have we done it? Have we participated in that in the past? Yeah. I mean, is there a reason to participate or not to participate that you would think of?
I've participated and I have not participated. The town manager has generally left it to my decision. As you can see, there's other factors that make us more comparable to certain towns than other towns. I've also found that I don't know how careful some of the data is that is submitted. You'll see things that are way off. Like you'll see somebody submitted a weekly salary as opposed to an annual salary. So I've used it to sort of check, but generally what I do is when I need to use something like what is in that compensation survey, I reach out to other town managers and other towns' HR departments and get current specific numbers.
Awesome. And you think, do you think we're still on track to be implementing the new HR software in June?
I have no idea. It's an extremely big project. Again, that was something else that the former town manager and I were doing as a project together. Obviously, roles have changed and responsibilities, and as much as I try and would like to, it is an incredible learning curve. And I do have Will and Dylan from IT are sort of join the team. So we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on this? Okay.
Yes, one thing, I appreciate the desire to bring everybody on board to the to the range. If they're below this, I appreciate the effort to bring them on board to at a substantially higher level to get them into the range. I would personally like to not see the budget line items. I don't want to say the word attacked, but I would not like to see the money come out of the budgets. I'd like to see us be able to take that out of reserves if we can, so that we can still provide the services to the town. So if we could find money in the reserve fund to do that, or that'd be better.
Do you mean unassigned?
Unassigned funds, yeah, unassigned funds. Reserve unassigned funds, yeah. I know that whenever we talk about taking money, we talk about taking it from paving. And I just don't want to see, I know we're going to go after public works. And I just don't want to see us going after public works because that's the biggest pot. I'm not saying that we're going to, but I know it's get attacked all the time about going after public works. So if we could see where it comes from in the whole town from unassigned funds, would be better off.
Gail, did you have
So just a few points to remind everybody, the union contracts, a couple of them have already been approved. So we already know that we're going to be adjusting budgets to accommodate those. Also, I'm actually quite insulted, Lanny, that you said something about taking money from paving, because we've been working so hard in the last 2 years to make sure that we have adequate money.
I didn't
for
say
paving.
you, I said it's been generally in the past.
Again, using the unassigned fund, that's the option that the board can use.
Yep.
But the budget is approved and it is now at the administrative level for them to make the decision of doing increases for staff or changing how those funds are allocated.
Nobody saw this coming though. They didn't see this. They didn't see these numbers coming though, to be fair to the department heads.
To be fair to the department heads, they have been aware that we are doing the compensation study. It has taken a lot longer than what we had anticipated. But I also think that we're all on the same page that you can have as many shovels as you want, but if you don't have anybody to run those shovels, then we need to make adjustments for it. And I can confidently say that the department leadership team does value their staff and to make sure that they are brought up to where they need to be.
Doubt that.
Well, and to comment on that, Lanny, just if this assuages your fear, there's not that many positions where we're totally out of whack. So like, there's definitely room for adjustment and improvement here, but we're not like looking at this in shock.
No, I
Okay, we're
want
way
both
off.
to happen. I want to see the services
No, I
the
understand.
taxpayers get provided. And I
I
also
think I
want to
heard
see
you and I
people.
understand what you're saying. I'm just saying
get
that
their
if you
fair
actually add
salaries.
up where we are underneath the range in all of these, it doesn't amount to that much money anyway. So it's
Any
not
more
like we're
questions for
grossly
Rachel?
under.
All right, Rachel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
So-
Rachel.
Thank you.
I'd say we take a 5-minute break and then come back. We got a bunch to go through, so maybe come back around 10.
Yeah, we're only on 8.
Yeah, we have a lot of time to make up.
Great. Our next item is the Arbor Day Proclamation. I'll just read that out loud and then we can take a motion, and if there's any discussion, we can discuss it. Town of Hartford, Vermont, Arbor Day Proclamation 2023. Whereas Vermonters have long recognized the contributions forests provide to the ecological, social, and economic sustainability of the state. And whereas trees in our cities and towns increases property values, enhances economic vitality of business areas, and beautifies our community. And whereas Vermonters are encouraged to become stewards of their own environment by managing forest land and planting and maintaining trees to improve the quality of life that we all enjoy. Now, therefore, we, the Select Board, and on behalf of the citizens of the town of Hartford, do hereby proclaim May 6, 2023 as Arbor Day in the town of Hartford. And we urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day with the Tree Board at their annual tree and shrub sale on this day. This to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands and to support our community forestry program. So I will take a motion to approve the proclamation.
So moved.
I will second.
We have a second from Kim. Any discussion?
Rocket Kim.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We have another proclamation, Older Americans Month proclamation. I will do the same thing. Town of Hartford, Vermont, Older Americans Month proclamation, 2023 proclamation. Whereas the town of Hartford, Vermont includes a growing number of older Americans who contribute their time, wisdom, and experience to our community. And whereas communities benefit when people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds have the opportunity to participate and live independently. And whereas the town of Hartford recognizes the need to create a community that offers the services and supports older adults may need to make choices about how they age. And whereas the town of Hartford can work to build an even better community for our older residents by not limiting our thinking about aging, exploring and combating stereotypes, emphasizing the many positive aspects of aging, inspiring older adults to push past traditional boundaries, and embracing our community's diversity. Now, therefore, we, the Hartford Select Board, do hereby proclaim May 2023 to be Older Americans Month. We urge every resident to celebrate our older citizens, help to create an inclusive society, and accept the challenge of flexible thinking around aging. I will take a motion.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I will second.
Kim will second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. The next item is the personnel policy, the adoption of the amendment. I believe that was the paid holidays, adding Juneteenth and replacing Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Paula, do you have anything to add on this one?
The only thing I have to add is that we did post the changes as required by the personnel policy, and I received no testimony regarding the change. I don't know if any select board member did.
Okay.
No. Okay.
Accept the motion, Dan?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the amendment to add Juneteenth Freedom Day as an official holiday, to add Indigenous Peoples Day as an official holiday in place of Columbus Day to the town of Hartford general personnel policy be adopted.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Kim will second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The next item is the town hall condenser warranty. Gail, are you handling that?
Yes,
one, or
I am.
Dana? Okay.
So just to follow up to the meeting on the 18th, there were a couple of questions that were asked, and we did receive the answers to them. The new condenser will connect to the old equipment and will not impact the manufacturer's warranty. And then also the question was asked, would this have been noticed, the salt and grime, had it been noticed if we had a proactive maintenance program in place? And the question, the answer is yes. It would have been probably caught a lot sooner than what it was. We do now have a maintenance plan for the building. So we're much more confident that going forward, we'll be able to identify these items quicker. And the contract has been executed and will be moving forward.
Okay. Any questions? Lynn?
I believe it was asked how to mitigate this in the future. Do they have any ideas on mitigation for the salt and the grime?
They did not come up with any solution. However, being able to have an preventative maintenance in place, they'll be able to identify it and work with the town to figure out how we can prevent it. Not knowing how it actually happened to begin with, because nobody was involved in it. So they will be exploring it.
Thank you.
All right, so our next item is the ambulance debt write-off. We have Chief Cooney here.
Yep, I'll just summarize real quick. Annually, we come to see you to write off 1 year of debt. We only keep 2 years of debt on the books for the ambulance service. This year, for the period of July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020, the amount of uncollectible debt is $148,910.49. I'm happy to answer any questions you have on it.
Questions? Lady?
Yeah, Chief, what I'd really like to see alongside this is some trends as far as which way this is going. Are we writing off more and more debt every year, or do you have the numbers? Or can you come up with the numbers for the past? I mean, we're gonna approve this, but just like to know if we're writing off more or less and how the trend is progressing.
Sure. No, I mean, just easily, I can tell you that last year you wrote off $138,499 and change. So you saw about a $10,000 increase in uncollectible debt between the period of 2018 and 19. And this year's we're writing off 2019 and 2020. Lots of variables goes into what accumulates as uncollectible debt. Some is mandatory write-offs through Medicare and Medicaid. So you can assume that if we encounter as an ambulance service more and more Medicare recipients and Medicaid recipients, that we're going to have to write off more. So that increase is going to drive up. And in this case, the largest write-offs are occurring in the private pay section. So those are people that either have insurance and didn't pay, or don't have insurance that aren't paying, or we were unable to collect. So as those instances occur, if we encounter more people that don't have insurance, then obviously those are going to get 100%.
You don't have any idea what the trend is on those numbers?
I do have the percentages from last year as compared to this year.
What was last year's number, if you don't mind me asking?
For which
The private pay?
category? Private
Private
pay,
pay.
last year we wrote off 67% of our debt was on the private pay section. This year it's 61. So
Yeah,
actually
so
trend, that category trended down
Turn it down. Okay.
in those 2 periods.
And there's no way for us to do anything different on the other 2 categories. I mean,
No, because they
Pretty
can't
locked in.
predict the demographic we're going to serve,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So we're going to encounter patients as they need services. And I don't know
Right.
what categories they're going to be in or predict.
it would be, I know that's not a topic for this conversation, but it would be interesting to know if we could get more input from a social worker, how many of these calls could be eliminated that are not paid for write-offs, because this is just, it costs us a lot of money every year to write off debt. And I'm not sure if it's eliminated, if we could eliminate some of this or not, but when I look at it, $148,000 is a big chunk of change. Thank you.
Rocket?
Chief, quick question. What is the difference between the dollar amount of debt that we're writing off versus the real cost to the town?
That's an interesting question, because you'd have to compare it to exactly what we're incurring for expenses.
Yeah, right.
So our rates are based on the region for the most part.
Right.
Hartford has probably the lowest ambulance rates we're charging for customers.
Sure.
Has a lot to do with our demographics. too.
Yeah.
To compare that to the true cost of what it costs to put the ambulance out the door.
Yeah.
Funny you should mention that we're actually in the queue to do that kind of data collection.
Okay.
The federal government a few years ago petitions, there's been a petition to increase Medicare reimbursement.
Mhm.
So Congress has put out this study that's mandatory for anybody that receives Medicare to accumulate that data. It's called the cost reporting report. Hartford got picked in this tier, so we'll be reporting out at the end of this fiscal year for that data. But the intent is to say how much Medicare reimbursement is actually coverable by the agency that's providing the service, and do their Medicare rates need to increase to pay for what the delivery costs are?
Right.
Because agencies like ours, and especially in the private ambulance service, they're not seeing the payback to
Yeah.
providing the service.
I mean, I'm theoretically happy to write off infinite unpaid debt, but I'm not necessarily willing to write off unrecovered costs, infinite unrecovered costs, right?
Sure.
But in running a humane society, I get that we're going to accept costs as a part of operating our society and providing services. So I think just having an understanding of what those two different numbers are would be helpful, because it's possible that real costs don't go up much year over year, but that build costs might go up a lot, in which case it's not really any different to us, right? So yeah, maybe in the future, I'll look forward to that data.
Yeah, and we're trying to look at our processes too, to see
Sure.
if there's cost recoveries that we can be made there. I talked to the town manager the other day about looking at, well, what does a debt collection service look like for the town of Hartford for
Right.
these kind of purposes?
Yeah.
We've had explored that a long time ago. We haven't done that currently.
Yeah.
Just kind of see does that even work? in
Right,
this
and
scenario?
I mean, it would be tough, like even with like federal mileage reimbursements, I'm sure there are some sort of mileage depreciation formulas that we could use just to know, over time, if we're doing, let's say, 20,000 miles a year in the ambulance, doing these calls, what that's going to cost us in terms of real depreciation on these vehicles, and how we factor that into our CIP or, yeah, so just having a better understanding of that in the future would be pretty cool. We'll move the right direction.
Jim and then Ray.
Yeah, okay.
I had a similar, so I had asked about the rates. So the rates went from like 650 to 900, I think, for
the BLS,
yeah, a couple of months. So first question was, are the amounts we're writing off, they're based on what people owed with the old rates, right? So with the new rates, do you anticipate, like, so even if we're writing off $10,000 more in ambulance fees now for that fiscal year, are you anticipating that we're going to generate more revenue with the higher ambulance fees for 24?
Yeah, I think so, is the best answer I can give. So when we were using our old rates, what we did is we balanced our rates based on, we were so below what the rest of the Upper Valley was doing, that it brought us up closer. When we submitted bills at the 650 rate for a basic ambulance call, and I actually put those together. So a typical, and this is a Medicare example, so for prior to FY 23, when we had a Medicare call, like we billed the individual's Medicare for $780, these are true numbers, $786.30 for the ambulance transport. Medicare gets that bill and then they send back the response. Mandatory write-off of that call is immediately $193.68. The government says you can't collect.
And that is a number that goes into the write-off amount? Okay.
Yes, it is. So Medicare writes us a check back for $474.10 on that $700 ambulance call to pay for our costs as far as what Medicare will accept, and then allows us to bill the individual for a small percentage of that. In this case, that patient would get a bill back from us for $118 to cover that amount. Now, either they pay that or they don't pay that. We're still well below the $786 we billed for that patient, and that immediately gets shifted into the write-off category that you see.
Yeah.
So and when we found that when we increased our rate to now, it's like $1,025 for that same service, you see about a $30, $40 increase in what Medicare is paying us back on that charge. The write-off gets a little bit higher, but we're getting a little bit back and writing off the mandatory amount.
What was it? Are we in the current? Is that?
We haven't got to that transition
Okay.
point yet.
Gotcha.
No. We probably won't see that data for another 2 years, I think. Yeah.
Thanks.
Chief, does a paramedic on board automatically lend itself to becoming an ALS build?
No. Medicare rules break the categories down. There's BLS, which is pretty much just transportation.
Right.
ALS 1 and ALS 2, and there is a chart that indicates. So our billing technician, Michelle, my administrative assistant, is our billing clerk as well. So she has to apply the diagnosis codes to all these different. Once she reads the ambulance report, apply the diagnosis codes like you do when you go to the doctors.
Right.
And then if certain codes meet the qualifiers, that pushes it into the ALS 1 rate or the ALS 2 rate at the higher rate.
And how much is a callback salary of a firefighter slash paramedic factored into this? Because of the fact that we're paying paramedics at a higher rate than we are non-paramedics.
It really isn't. It's more based on market. The rates we're charging is more based on market than it is actuals.
Okay. It'd be nice to have paramedics across the board, but I didn't know if that was going to drive up the rates and.
No, because it really is about the procedures, right? So
Okay.
if somebody's sick enough to need a cardiac monitor, an IV, certain cardiac drugs during transport, that's what drives the cost of the call up. It's the
Understood.
procedures and the
Okay.
diagnosis.
All right, thank you.
I'll take a motion on this one. Cam?
I move to authorize the town manager to direct the finance director, kind of redundant, I guess, and the fire department to write off $148,910.49 as uncollected ambulance debt.
Second.
I'll second.
I'll give it a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Thanks.
thanks, Scott. Our next item is the select board approval of annual financial plan, the TA 60. Chris, are you doing that one or is Gail?
I can do it.
You can do it.
Sure.
So it's just a report that's filed every year with the state to ensure that we're actually spending money towards our roads.
Okay.
And that's how they basically do their calculations and agree to give us the money that they give us in aid for our highways. I can't take credit for this form, but that's what it is.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Take a motion unless Kim, you had a question or Lanny?
Yeah, make a recommendation that the select board, I guess there's no motion here, select board endorse the annual financial plan.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And we'll second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, thank you, Chris. Okay, so now we're going to get to the reallocation of ARPA funds. Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, so this is simpler than it sounds. As bids come in, the marketplace is crazy and costs are going up faster than engineers' estimates can anticipate. So what we've done here is we've had shortages on two projects that have come in, one being the Quechee Box Culvert and one being the Fairview Water Main project, which eliminates the water main that's in jeopardy going down the Gate Street Hill. So those are over budget, and then we anticipate a shortfall of trying to get across the railroad for Latham Works. We're a little bit delayed on that one. So also we have a revised engineer's estimate on the Quechee Main Street water main extension connecting the two sides of the system. That one isn't as much as an emergency or a necessity. So what we propose to do is eliminate that because the new budget's coming in so high that that is going to require some sort of loan or bonding that we would need to do. And what we're really trying to do is spend it on shovel-ready projects and that serve a community purpose. So we're asking to reallocate $240,000 to the Quechee Main Street Box Culvert, $20,000 to the Fairview Terrace Water Main Project, and then the remaining $140,000 to the Latham Works Water Main, which will get us further down that street. As you know, that neighborhood's in the floodplain. It's bordered by the railroad. It's one way in and out. And so to us, that all of those conditions lead us to believe that's a proper use of spending this money, because we don't have to wait for a bond vote to pass. It guarantees that we're at least going to get fire protection across the railroad tracks.
Okay. Any questions for Chris? Lanny?
I guess I'm confused on why it is that we don't use the balance that we had after we spent our ARPA funds. I mean, the numbers that were presented to us, we had $260,279.38 after we approved everything. Why aren't we using some of those funds that are balance of the ARPA funds?
Well, because like I said, that's
a conversation amongst you people. I'm here to reallocate funds that have been dedicated to DPW. DPW, I'm telling you, I cannot guarantee that the Queechee Water Main Street project can occur within the time frame, because now that's going to be subject to, even with ARPA funds, a bond or loan approval process.
I understand. I just think that we have money there.
Yeah, well, we don't have adequate money to complete all those projects with that additional funds.
Kel, did you have a?
Correct. I just wanted to
Okay.
reiterate what Chris was saying, that this is the best use of those funds, because if we didn't reallocate those funds and we keep them at the Queechee water, the project's not going to be done. It's not going to be done in time. So why not execute these projects that we can, still keep the funding in the ARPA account and utilize it for other projects? It's, as Chris said, it's a much bigger project. Even if we kept the 400,000 plus the 200, that's still not enough money to do the project.
So, and understand, DPW projects are unique. We're at the whim of the marketplace. It's not software. I can't go to a vendor, get you a quote that's good for a year. It depends on contractors' availability, if they'll even give you a bid. We're lucky to get one bid on several projects nowadays. So this is about predictability and getting something accomplished with the money.
Yeah, so I don't have any problem with funding these things, that they need to be done. I'm just wondering why it is we're holding out ARPA funds, that we have available.
Well, I would encourage you to keep that somewhat as a reserve, because we still have more bidding processes to go, and there's no saying that there won't be more surprises. One community just went out to bid. They anticipated a $9 million budget on their treatment plant upgrade, $14 million.
So with this reallocation, then these are all going to be projects that are going to go out to bid and be completed.
That's what we anticipate. The only thing that could hold us up on Latham Works is the railroad. We're hoping that it's not going to hold us up. We're in that process. If that holds us up, I have other projects that I can dedicate it to.
So when do you see Queechee Main Street water main being undertaken?
That project is, you have a new director of public works, and he'll be working with Gail trying to secure funding. The method of funding, which I'm going to assume it does not qualify for an SRF loan. It's going to have to be a traditional loan or bond. So they'll have to work out that, and they'll come forward with you with permission to get it onto a vote. But it is shovel ready, pending financing.
Queechee Main Street shovel ready?
The water main.
The water main.
Yeah.
All right, so
The water main is shovel ready too.
so that's just the question that we have to be able to answer to the residents of Queechee, why it is we're taking money from their
Well, you have,
water main.
well, we were tasked with not just shovel ready, but what is a pressing need, Queechee has water supply to those neighborhoods. It's an improvement of the system. Nut Lane has 150-year-old lines, some of which run right underneath the railroad tracks, along the railroad tracks. So, I consider that neighborhood in dire need of some improvements.
Good. Discussion, take a motion. Sure.
Just a
No rocket.
quick question. So I'm sorry. So the $600,000 in the system reserve account, that's not earmarked specifically for the Queechee Main Street water main, but it's just the DPW.
It's
Reserve.
in there. It's always been earmarked.
Okay, earmarked for that project specifically. And it's going to stay there. That's going to stay there.
It's going to stay there unless we have to come back because something else is falling apart, more pressing, but
Gotcha.
whatever is in that account currently.
Lanny?
Does this include any overruns, potential overruns?
And what I've asked, so each budget has a contingency worked into it, 10%. We'll get to that when we ask for approval of the contract.
Okay, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Lanny?
make a motion, the board approve reallocating the 400,000 of ARPA funds previously approved for the Queechee Main Street water main project as follows. 240,000 to the Queechee Main Street box culvert project, $20,000 to the Fairview Terrace water main project, and $140,000 to the Nut Lane Water Main Project.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Kim. Any more discussion? Jim?
I know I've been sent the link, but whenever I look on the town website, can you just describe where I find the project plan?
Project plans, so I have to do that. I do it as time allows. If you go to the Department of Public Works website
Oh, wait.
and you go on the left tab at the bottom of,
Website?
on the left bar, Department of Public Works.
On the town website.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
If you go onto the left-hand side of the Department of Public Works site
Okay.
and you scroll down on that, well, this construction project updates.
Okay. It says site under construction.
Yeah, so if you click on those, or if you click on construction updates, there's a way there. I've started inputting them as I can. The ones that are up, you can look at them. So if you,
Okay, oh, and that does have the paving plan there too.
that has the paving bid documents, which within there, there's a schedule in there that
Okay.
includes, tells you all the rows from station to station, what the improvements are. Those bids came in, so the next meeting, hopefully I'll have a request to approve a contract. Waiting to hear about a $200,000 paving grant. If we don't get that, it gets scaled back tremendously.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Chris, we're going back to, I think, Fairview Terrace water main replacements.
Yep, so this is the first project we've had in a while where we received multiple bids. We've reviewed them all. The engineers given us their reviews on them, and basically what we're asking to do with the ARPA funding we've requested is approve Isaac Excavation and Construction contract for them to do it. Get a new water main with fire protection up the extension of Fairview Terrace, which is important given the age and size of the structures up there. And most importantly, it'll get a water main over the hill, one continuous length of pipe. It'll be a directional board and get you to Maplewood Terrace, and it'll get the water main that we have fears of in Gate Street going up the hill out of that road.
Okay.
And that will simplify the engineers' work they're currently doing on reconstructing it.
Okay, so that water main will be gone, and then they're still working on that.
No, there's voids under that roadway. If a void affects a pipe and a pipe deflects beyond its tolerance and that lets go, we have a big problem. So we're trying to get that resolved ASAP.
Yeah, Lanny, you have a question?
Yeah, I've been asked to scrutinize this a little bit more. Why is it we would not replace it in place and utilize, kill two birds with one stone, basically, to try to prep the surface for when we're gonna do Fairview Terrace next?
So I actually just answered that question for a couple of residents regarding that. So the water main is ready to go right now. The retaining wall isn't.
I understand that, but why can't we tear up the pavement and where the substructure is?
So
that wouldn't have any impact on the retaining
So
wall, right?
if we put a water main there, it's, well, A, it's not a stable surface to put the water main on. B, if we replace that retaining wall, we're looking at all sorts of construction methods. We're trying to narrow it down right now. I don't have time or want to get into that discussion tonight because it's a bigger ordeal than we know.
Yeah.
But basically, you're talking about geogrids being placed back and forth. So you would have just built a water line only to come through and have to rip it out to build the wall.
When you're talking about retaining wall, which retaining wall is it you're talking about? The one that's on up above the street or the one that's down below?
The one that's below the street.
The one that's below
the
Fairview
stone
Terrace.
wall, the stone wall that is in shambles.
Right.
Above Maplewood along the Gate Street Hill. That is holding back the ground that the water main is located in. We are getting it out of there, cross country.
No rocket and
Hey, Chris, just a quick question. seeing the three bids here, it seems like they're all pretty tightly ranged, which I thought was interesting. And just wondering if there were considerations beyond cost or if it was just the lowest one that we chose.
So I mean, I know where you're probably getting at that with our town policy of 5%.
No, it's actually not even that. It's literally that I know Knott's is a local name. I've seen Knott's and they're obviously in the next line item, budget item. So it's not to say that Isaacs won't do a fabulous job. It was just more of a question of if it was just literally just price, lowest bidder, or if there were other considerations that come in.
It's low bidder, but it's a thorough review and background check on the bidders. They're all capable and the fair and, adherent to federal laws about competitive bidding.
Of course.
And the forms we used for this project.
So they all have to meet some minimum
Yeah.
standard to be vetted, and then you can take.
Yeah, and it's, and based on their current workload, we feel they're well positioned to do the job.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I have no objection to it. It was just more of a curiosity than anything. So thank you.
Can I just quickly add that, while I think as a board, we sort of determined that our goal is to reconstruct Gate Street, like for it to be bonded, the voters still have to approve that that's what's actually gonna happen. Like, I agree that I want that to happen, but until the voters approve the bond to pay for it, we can't guarantee we're gonna do it.
I understand that.
I
I
will
guess,
second that because I think the price number is going to be a shock, and this guarantees that the water main gets out of that roadway.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Yes, go ahead, Rocket.
Mr. Chair, I recommend the board authorize, I move that the board authorize the Director of Public Works or the acting town manager to execute an amendment to the DG contract for completing the engineering services through the construction and post-construction phases. A contract to Isaacs for construction of the water main and to execute any necessary change orders within the project budget of $420,000. Emergency or other expenses beyond the project budget shall follow the purchasing policy procedures.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
And we'll second. Any discussion? Yeah, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so we've got 5 to 1 to 1. Lanny voted no. All right, next item is staff recommendation for Queechee Main Street Box Culvert Award of Contract. Chris?
All right, so much the same as the last one.
Okay.
We only received one bid, but we did receive that from Knott's in town. It is a complicated project. There were other people looking at it, but they backed out due to how complicated the project is. Having only one bid, we did have the engineers do a thorough review of the bid and some back and forth with them, and they feel the amount was warranted. I will remind you, we purchased the box culvert and we'd be storing it if we don't install it. So our recommendation is that we do move forward with the installation, because as we all know, it's only going to get more expensive next year. And as far as using ARPA funds, it's not an enterprise fund, so this should make everyone happy. That is, all users of that road benefit from the project.
Any questions for Chris? Lanny?
And what is the break ground date for this?
After, it's supposed to be after the Balloon Festival.
Okay. I'll take a motion. Jim?
But
Mr. Chair, I move that the board authorize Director of Public Works or acting town manager to execute a contract amendment with DG. With DG to complete the engineering services through construction and post-construction phases, execute a contract to Knott's Excavating for construction of the project, and to execute any necessary change orders within the project budget of $1,040,000. Emergency or other expenses beyond the project budget shall follow the purchasing policy procedures.
second.
With a second from Lanny, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Then I think the last one for you, Chris, is the solid waste feasibility assessment.
Assessment and feasibility study, yeah.
Okay.
So as we all know, there's several issues going on with the solid waste facility, with the ground settlement, the methane, basically the neglect over the years, the change in marketplace and how it's used. And competition from across the river. So during our ARPA meetings, it was requested that we look into getting a solid facilities assessment by a professional engineering solid waste consultant. And look at not just that, but what it's going to take to have the facility either reused municipally or reused privately, and what type of investment that would take for carrying costs, either for a lease or for ourselves to hold on to. And so previously we had done an RFQ process where the board ranked Sanborn Head as the #1 in all 3 phases of our solid waste RFQ process. Wasn't even close. Since that time, they have helped us with the recertification of the facility. They've helped us with a cursory review of the methane and identifying possible ways to go about correcting it. And they've helped us with the C and D that was hidden below ground and testing it and trying to find ways to get rid of it. On top of that, they did the permitting for the solar field on top of the landfill. So given their unique stance in that we are currently in the middle of different contracts with them, we went to them because they are by far the ones with the most intimate knowledge, and were able to work up a proposal for this assessment. We incorporated into it a final plan because the sealing off electrical conduits isn't going to work. It's too cost prohibitive to get the methane from leaking in. So we've gone into not just investigating what is left for a landfill, but we're going to investigate the methane system through investigative manners, test holes and borings and so forth to come up with that corrective plan, which the facility needs. So that's incorporated into this as an add-on. And then of course the feasibility under different scenarios. We worked with them on that to get that price out of them. It's uniquely tailored with them. And that came in, I think I gave you a range of ballpark of 75 to 100,000 without the detailed methane part of it. We worked that down to 87,500 with them. So our recommendation is that the RFQ process is a year-to-year thing. We've had great experience with them. 3-step process. We're recommending that you renew their standing. As the #1 consultant, we're recommending that you do execute a contract with them to get it done in as timely a manner as possible, so that we can go in hopefully into the next fiscal year with some planning numbers. And then because it is an invasive study with test holes and borings, that we do carry the remainder of that 100,000 we talked about as a contingency fund in case we find unknown things subsurface. That of course requires you to, because we work this out with them directly, because they are currently employed by us. If we treat this as a separate project, we need to waive the purchasing policy of having other engineers and consultants who don't know as much about the facility bid on this project.
Okay. Other questions for Chris on this? Kim?
How long, like, when do you, if this is approved, presumably, when do you think this will all happen? How long will it take?
I have to negotiate with them. They're like everyone else. They're short-staffed, you know. The sooner we get into their schedule, the sooner we can get their time. They're a specialty. There aren't many of them out there.
Okay.
But hopefully with their already background knowledge of the facility, it'll facilitate moving it along or be easier for them to take on.
Okay.
So at the end of all this Sanborn Head investigation, are we going to have a detailed answer to what it's going to take to close the facility, or if we can keep operating it?
Well, what we're going to have is a detailed assessment of the facility, all its shortcomings of a engineer's opinion. You know how those are. So add a fluff factor to it of what it's going to cost to make these improvements. And then we're going to have to, there's an internal part of the component of, you know, how much is our borrowing rate? What's it going to cost us to cover these improvements? And then we have to submit, come to a decision like, is this financially feasible for us? We'll figure out the internal part is we have to figure out how much we're bringing in, how much revenue we generate. If we got to take on this additional debt, are we going to be able to cover it? Or the other option is you can lease the site, but what do we need to lease it for to cover the additional expenses we have?
I think that I'm speaking for myself, but I believe the consensus of the board is that we want to close this facility. So I would like a number brought back to us at the end as far as what it's going to take to satisfy the requirements for the state to be able to close this
We're going to be
facility.
partway there with closing the C&D pile. Once we get that cleaned out, that'll be terminated. We have buildings that have mold that need to be removed that haven't been dealt with. We have methane that we can't just leave. We have to mitigate that. So all those expenses to close it will be identified. It all, part of that expense though is, it's not that much more to figure out like, okay, to stabilize the site, what's it cost to mothball it? What does it cost to make a few improvements and actually be able to continue to use it or reuse it for other purposes? So there's a lot of value in what it provides. It's all in how you want to use it.
I understand. I just want to make sure that it gives us a basis of understanding on this facility to decide what our next steps are, whether to close it or to continue it, without going into any more cost on investigation techniques.
Well, we have to mitigate the methane, right? We all know that. It's pumping into buildings. This is going to figure out what it's going to cost us to mitigate that methane. Even if it's not occupied, you can't have methane building up into an explosion, type density inside.
I just don't want to hear, we need to do more studies. We need more studies. That's the big thing.
It's an assessment and the feasibility and is what it's going to cost us to either fix it up, tear buildings down, mothball them, what you want. That information can also be used to what it costs to, if we lease it to someone, we're not basically giving it away and not covering our cost.
Like to make a motion?
Yes, Lynn?
Nicholas, anybody else has any questions?
Well, just I was curious if it needs to be 3 separate motions. Or can we do
Yeah,
it?
you could probably do them all together.
Preference?
I'm going to just read them all together.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I make a motion that the board approve renewing the request for qualification rankings for solid waste consulting, engineering, and environmental monitoring services provides with Sanborn Head recognized the highest ranking firm, and that the board waives section 3.6, the purchasing policy for this project as allowed by section 3.7 of said policy, and that the board authorize the director of public works or acting town manager to execute a contract with Sanborn Head to complete the facility assessment and feasibility study in the amount of $87,500 and execute any necessary change orders within the project budget of $100,000. Emergency or other expenses beyond the project budget shall follow the purchasing policy procedures.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Kim will second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, great. Thank you, Chris.
All right.
Good to see you. The next item is the South Main Street noise complaint. We have Chief Sheldon here for that one.
Before the chief looks at this, has he seen this? Mr. Pomjoy just presented to us. Chief, have you seen what Mr. Pomjoy just gave us this evening?
I have not.
Okay, we can get you a copy.
Some of this, may be in this complaint.
Chief, whenever you're ready.
Well, I think you all have my report that I gave through significant acts. I don't know what more I can answer for you for what questions you have, but we have bought the new meters and we are training on them. It's important that we have the right equipment to make sure that when we do issue a ticket for noise, that it's within the ordinances and the equipment is modernized and actually accurate.
Okay.
Now, we believe it's accurate, but his cell phone app says it wasn't, so we took measures to clarify for the future.
Okay.
We have met with the owners of Big Fatties today. Sergeant Ebenhauser has, and we're starting to negotiate and try to mediate the problem. So
Yeah.
it doesn't blow up into something bigger, where we have to take enforcement action. We don't really want to issue tickets
Okay.
unless we have to.
Sounds good. Yeah, it seemed like there was, right, when the officers were testing the noise level, it didn't exceed the level of nuisance. And so from a select board, I think that's what Mr. Palmjay asked, like, what can we do as a select board? I mean, if we wanted to revisit the ordinance and change decibel levels or times of day, we could always do that. But I appreciate this report on where we are right now. Are there any questions? Lanny?
So I think I know the answer to the question, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. So currently, the owner of the business is well within the requirements of the law as far as noise ordinance goes.
So far, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? We don't have a motion or anything on this one, so it's just basically if you have questions you'd like answered, this is the opportunity.
No, I haven't read through this
Yeah.
because I think
Go
like
ahead.
Mr. Palmjay said that they had some recommended solutions, so we'll take a look at it and maybe it can come back again, but I haven't looked at this yet.
Yeah,
For
we
the
could all
time
take a look at it and see how we want to proceed or if we want to proceed. Lanny?
Have you, Chief, have you personally met with Mr. Palmjoy?
No, we talked about it today, meeting with him, because again, we met with the owner of Big Fatties, and I think it's fair to meet with both sides.
Right.
So we're working on that. It was a discussion we had today.
I would be interested in knowing where the compromise is when you come up with something. I mean, I understand that Brandon Fox is running a business and he has noise he has to create to run his business. But I also understand Mr. Palmjoy's standpoint of he needs to be able to feel safe in his home with noise. So I will look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Rocky?
Chief, thanks for waiting this whole evening to be here. Question, I want to acknowledge, I know you have a long drive home. The question on this, are there any facts or is there any probability that some of the facts would then retroactively change, or are we just operating with this as sort of a current fixed state, which is that to your knowledge or to our understanding, there has been no violation?
From what I'm reading with the police reports, there's been no violation.
Right.
And we don't have a decimal reading. The officers have asked Big Fatty's staff to close the door. And that's been some of the problem. The exterior door open and noise comes out. So based on that, I mean, could there be a violation by decimal level? Sure. Was it mediated so we didn't have to take any enforcement action? Yes.
Right.
So from this point forward with the new meters, obviously if an officer gets called down there and takes a decibel reading that's over the ordinance limit, we will go speak with the staff on duty that night and we will try to mediate the situation.
Right. And so with that, Mr. Palmjoy has sort of suggested that he has, or has furnished evidence, and I presume that he's got evidence on his phone, his decibel reader. Is there any evidence that could be procured that would then retroactively change the facts in terms of violation of ordinance or anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so we're sort of working with clean slate moving forward.
Yeah, his decibel reader is his app on his cell phone. I'm not sure, like I said in my response to you, I'm not sure how legal that would be in a court. If he challenged us in court and we got to go in front of a judge, but a judge believed that his decimal reader on his cell phone app was.
And I read what State's Attorney Ward said, Goodenough said.
Yeah, the noise in the nighttime ordinance is a criminal violation, not an ordinance violation. My past experience with situations like this in Rutland is the judges don't find probable cause. If they have a outside consumption permit, that kind of goes along with that territory.
Well, and surely noise in the night has got to be designated within a specific set of hours. So
dusk to dawn.
Right.
So it changes time of year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lanny?
From a potential of harm to the town, have we consulted town attorney to find out where our position is on this?
No.
I have not.
Okay, so as long as we're enforcing within the law, I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer this, but as long as we're enforcing it within the limits of the law, there's no liability to the town of Hartford.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's my understanding.
All right, that's the question. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. All right. Chief Cooney's up next. Revisions to local emergency management plan adoption.
You staying for the?
Okay, so annually after town meeting each year, statute requires that we update and submit edits and changes to our local emergency management plan to the state of Vermont, so it can be updated into the state's emergency operation plan. I've completed that revision, changes some of the names that were associated with the previous document, and you have it before you tonight for adoption and submission to the state.
Questions for Scott?
No questions, make a motion.
Anyone else have a question?
I'd just like to make a comment, which I think we looked into last year. I remember as part of this process, when I first came on the board, Leo Fuller gave us a recommendation for some ICS training, and then was looking for it in subsequent years and couldn't find it. So I just put it back out there that if you know of anything that like select board members as emergency operations members of that team should be aware of what our roles are, I think it would be helpful for us to know that.
Sure.
And then the other part of that was just that I think like the documents in general, this is not relating specifically, but there's several of the agenda items are not searchable. They're not scanned in a searchable format, which is really frustrating because I was going to look for something. I can't go and do my own research and look at previous, where do I find the local emergency plan from previous years? This is not your.
No,
fault.
I understand.
It's just a general frustration that I could do my own research if I can just search for certain documents on the town website.
Yeah. Typically, I wouldn't recommend this be one of them.
You what?
I wouldn't recommend that this be one of those items on the town website, only because of the information contained within.
Right.
Typically,
Even in the agenda, like if it were searchable within the agenda, then I would still be able to go and find it if I were looking for it.
Gotcha.
It wouldn't necessarily need to be emergency documents in the document center, but if it's a document that I can do a search on the town website for local emergency plan. So that's just a constant preference.
Ben?
I'm gonna make a motion, but I want to ask a question first. I'm gonna do some heavy paraphrasing here. I believe at one point in time, and I'm not sure if it's written into the emergency management plan or not, about like having vaccinations or points of retrieving town leaders to certain positions within the town in case of emergencies. Is there something of that in that?
Yeah.
So there is it. There's something in that.
It's not in this, it's in the town's emergency operations plan. There's a continuity of operations plan that has to do with continuity of government. So if something critical happened, who's the next person in charge, what their roles and responsibilities are, those kind of things.
But
those are all in the town's emergency operations plan. That is different than this.
But there was also something written in there I thought about, like vaccinations for town leaders and stuff like that.
It is in a different plan. That's our point of distribution plan that has to do with how vaccinations and inoculations would happen for municipal employees and things like that.
Okay.
That's with the Department of Health. It's a
Right.
separate plan.
All right, I didn't know that. Okay, so with that said, I'd like to move the adoption of the 2023 local emergency management plan.
Okay, we have a second.
I'll second.
Kim will second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thanks, Scott.
That one just needs your signature.
I think I got it.
I already
Yeah.
did it.
All right, and then we've got the community safety review RFP discussion. So that was submitted by you, Gail.
Sure. No, I don't really have anything to add with it. In the agenda item, I included the original RFP where it was based from, and did ask Chief Sheldon and Chief Cooney to be here to be involved in this process. Also, we'll want to make sure that we put the next meeting for the discussion a little bit earlier on the 16th, and that way to really encourage community members to come out and be involved in it. And Chief Cooney and Chief Sheldon will also be here on the 16th, and then the goal is to finalize it if the board can have approval as a majority to get this out after the 30th meeting.
Okay.
So
it looks like we do have looks like one was issued in September of 2022.
correct.
And
And we
that's
only,
what we're looking at, this prior draft.
correct. And we only received one response back, and that was for $600,000.
Yep.
And I'll remind everybody that the amount that was approved is $50,000.
Okay. Lanny, then Kim.
This is not something that we're saying we're needing like community sessions for, right? Like we have to have 3 sessions. I can't remember what the term is now. The
No,
community hearings
No, it's
for-
not. We're inviting the community to come in to give their input. That we've heard from a lot of residents that they would like to have some sort of survey. And so this is actually goes hand in hand with it. And by having staff here, having the board, having residents, being able to hear everybody's voices, and given that the staff are the individuals who will be carrying this out, it's really important for them to be involved as well.
I imagine the next meeting will get the most comment probably, or participation, and we'll try and set it early on in the evening so people will come out, you know.
I just wanted to put in context that the $600,000 proposal was not so much a community safety assessment, but a community, what I would call a security assessment. It was a Texas company that really specialized. They worked with the Department of Homeland Security and the, I can't remember what other agencies, Department of Defense maybe, but it was about like a proposal to like surveil the town for safety. So it was immediately, just to kind of think on a template proposal that they had that they sent to any
Okay.
community. So it was not tailored to the RFP that was issued.
Okay. So we've got the last RFP. I mean, I don't know if we want to have thoughts on, what kind of, just what the scope of work would be, or if Chief Sheldon or Chief Cooney have any thoughts on it. Lanny?
Yeah, I'd just like to know what we're gonna get for 50,000 and whether the recommendation of the 2 chiefs falls into what we're gonna get for $50,000. That's the concern I have, because we got 50,000 out there. Are we gonna get the information that we are looking for from this in order to serve the town? There's a big difference between 600,000 and 50. So
I'm happy to respond if you like. I mean, let's do it. I mean, basically, let me just chime in and say that there's only one way to find out, and that's to issue an RFP. The 600,000, I would not say is comparable to what I think this RFP is looking for is not going to cost $600,000. We won't know until we get proposals for it.
and if we get a proposal that's say $75,000, are we gonna reject it? I mean, are we gonna forcefully say we gotta meet $50,000 and if we don't meet it, we're not doing this? I mean, I guess that's the point I'm not quite sure about.
We'd have to
At this
see what the
point.
proposal was, and the scope of it, and how comprehensive it was, right? I don't think I could.
I mean, I'm happy to, I feel like, because I was a part of the original recommendation, but this is not, I mean, I'm not even currently a member of the HGRA, which is the committee that first recommended it. But it is definitely something as a member of the board. I mean, even like Rocket, to your comments earlier about the volume of police calls, that how do we, ideally get that closer to 0. And one way I think to do that is to be identifying through a community safety assessment where there are areas that we can look at for better proactive, preventative sort of community support that would then strengthen the overall fabric of the community. But I guess, and I know that both chiefs had some recommendations on what they might like to see additionally in this. So I think it would be great to hear from them.
So who's gonna narrow the scope to this to make it fit within the 50 grand though? That's,
What do you mean?
who's gonna narrow the scope of what we're trying to achieve on this review, on this community safety review? it's gonna narrow the scope of it to reach that $50,000.
I think that there's a misunderstanding. The RFP doesn't cost any money to put it out. And so with the RFP, we'll have the scope of work that we want to have done. And when the results come back in, that will be the determination. Normally, they'll give you a list of items that they can do and what the cost of it is. And so it may be à la carte, or it may be a set price to do whatever it is. We're not spending the $50,000 right now. Right now, we need to determine what do we want to have in the RFP? What are we looking for to get out of it?
No, I'm well aware of that. I'm just saying, when we put this out, we're not telling people we've got $50,000 to spend. What can you give us for that?
That's not normally how it
We're not
works.
asking questions, okay.
I think Rocket, and then we can hear from the chiefs.
Well, actually, question for both chiefs. I mean, my question, which I've asked previously, and it's to the public, and which I would love to direct to you. One thing for me is that I have felt that there has not been a consistent effort on the part of some of the champions of this to actually go visit with public safety first. And I find it difficult to stomach people suggesting that we should hire an outside consultant, having not done the homework first themselves to identify that there might be a problem.
That's a question.
There's a question in here. That's the foundation for the question. The second is that then the question that I do have is, within our community, with all the layers of government that we have and our open meetings and different departments, both staff as well as 7 select board members, I have a difficult time understanding where what citizens are not able to express themselves to our government, to communicate their concerns or their needs to our government in some form that some paid outside consultant would somehow be able to find. So that for me is to say, what is it? Having never served in one of your departments, do you see a value in it? Are there obvious gaps in ways that our citizenry might actually be falling through the gaps and not being heard through some channel that this outside consultant and spending this money is going to actually elucidate? And do you actually feel within your departments, I'm sure you feel that there's need, but do you feel that an outside consultant might meaningfully identify issues that would be worth pursuing? Or is there more homework that we can do within our own town governance first to save that tax dollars and still move forward with progress?
The way I'm looking at this is three different options here for the town. One is to go the way we went the first time before I was here, with this an RFP to do all of it. The second version is to hire a company to manage it, a consulting company to manage the process, and we do all the work on the ground ourselves not through necessarily government, because unfortunately some people just don't like government, but through our partners in the community, like Turning Point, HCC, HCRS, Claire Martin, The Haven, all the different nonprofits and social work groups to do the work on the ground.
Right.
The other option, I think that was mentioned to me by a community member, but another option would be that we do all the work and we manage it ourselves. Now, first and foremost, I applaud you for doing this. This is what Rutland went through back in 2012 and 13. We decided we needed to take action. Law enforcement wasn't the best response, and I'm here to tell you that we're not the best response for most of what we go on. We're here for violence and crime, but yet we go on a mental health call. And why are we the ones going when we have 40 to 60 hours of training on mental health, and the mental health professionals are sitting in their office not responding? They're the ones with the master's degree. So what you've accepted and what society has accepted, decades old, is government's response is law enforcement or EMS. Unfortunately, that's a workaround, right? That's not a solution. It's a workaround because government goes, okay, you're right. We pay these people, let's send them out. And Chief Cooney and I have had these discussions. But workarounds become normalized. And once you become normalized, the workaround is average. It's not, or below average response. It's not the expert response. So what we have to do is sit back and go, okay, who are the experts? Once we identify the problems and what we want to address through marginalized communities, the individuals who are seeking services that have barriers in place, how do we identify that? And once that's identified, which I think we have plenty of partners in this community to do that for us, that are not government related. Once you have that, how do we allocate our resources within our community? And it's not just Hartford town, it is all the resources that are out there for us, all of our community partners. Okay, and that's where you start getting that collaboration, that coalition building to address the concerns. But if I'm sitting out there in front of somebody and I say, please tell me your problems, and I'm in a uniform, I'm not going to get the answer I need. We need somebody, we need the social workers that are out there already, going out and doing the work. And if we need to go with them to help because they're nervous, then we do that. But again, we've accepted the workaround that law enforcement or EMS, fire goes on these calls because it's the easy answer.
Right.
But the right answer is the experts in these fields. So one option is to let this consulting company, whoever it may be, come in and do all the work, as Laney said. Tell us what we need to do. The other option is to hire someone to consult and do their work, because not only once you manage the project and you do all the groundwork, someone has to analyze all that data. And that's really where the important work gets done, right?
Sure.
Analyzing what's collected and giving a product that we understand. I've listened to you guys going through the whole wage survey and all the questions, right? So we want someone who can clean the data, scrub it, and make it understandable for our community members and our partners within our community. Then we work together to go out and handle these issues. My goal is there's typically 80 to 85% of calls that law enforcement get. I can't speak for Chief Cooney, but law enforcement get that are non-criminal in nature. Out of how many of those calls is there a potential of violence? My experience has been about 50% of those calls of the 80 to 85% are non-violent, which someone can go on. That's thousands of calls a year with the interaction with someone in need is not a government official in a uniform, with a gun in their head. It's a social worker or an outreach person going, I'm here to help you. Most people think when we get on scene with them, we're arrest. Okay, so bad experiences create trauma, and that trauma, I'm on my soapbox, sorry. But when you're looking at trying to establish relationships, there's 3 levels of trust.
Right.
There's no trust, distrust, and trust. So if someone distrusts you, you can't get to trust without going to no trust first. Okay, so that's the basic mediation, right? Conflict resolution stuff. So it can't be me sitting there or a police officer sitting there in uniform asking a marginalized community member why or what the issues are in their life and what makes them feel unsafe, because it might be me and they may not want to answer directly. So I'm willing, and I know HCC is putting together a proposal for you all because they want to apply to this RFP.
Okay.
Emily from HCC, but that's gonna be funding, right?
Right.
She needs work. She needs staff members. Her staff is on board, but it's going to take salary. It's going to take all the boots on the ground. And then once you get all that done, and if she wants to organize it, I still have to have more meetings with her. You're talking about data crime analyst work, which is expensive too. So what does all that look like, Laney? I can't answer that. We won't know until the time comes.
So would the short answer be that you do see value in this, is what I'm gathering?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. This is what we did in Rutland, 10 years ago. But what I'm saying is, the important part is if we do the work ourselves, either option 2 or 3.
Right.
I mean, I push with option 3 because I'm kind of the guy that wants to go out and do the work. But when we're done with that work, we already have those relationships established. If you hire an outside company to come here and do all this work, then you have no relationships established yet. Right? They're doing all the work. Their people are on the ground, or they're hiring locals to go and do it. We don't have relationships established.
Right.
If we do the work, the relationship's already there, and you're already ahead of the game when the final report's written. That's my view on it.
Do you mean, what do you mean by we? Do you mean the police department, the town of Hartford, or the Hartford community?
Hartford community.
Okay.
Because it can no longer be, when you're talking about this work, it can't be town of Hartford and the community. It has to be everybody in one.
Right. And just a clarifying question, Chief, when you're talking about 12-ish years ago in Rutland, are you referencing also the Project Vision initiative?
Project Vision, yes. Identify the problem statements, if you want to use the terms of, of mediation in strategic planning, you identify the problems. So what is your problem statement and what are your action steps? And what committees do you form to start addressing those issues?
And so the work that was done in terms of data collection there was funded through the city. I know that there was a collection of organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, and the town, the city itself.
The city stepped up, don't quote me on the numbers, but about $450,000 was provided, and that gave us a data crime analyst and an executive director for Project Vision and a outreach command or outreach sergeant for Project Vision, go out with the partners in the field and work with them when they didn't feel safe, or to collaborate. Because what comes of this, in what is the best part about this whole process, when you start getting it rolling and down the line, 5 years or 8 years, they finally start to realize that law enforcement is part of the community. Right now, when you have a divided community, law enforcement is not part of the community. So once you start to see that law enforcement is part of the community, what you start to see is an increase, unfortunately, in some crimes being reported, like domestic violence. They start to have confidence in their law enforcement. They start to see, you will see sometimes a spike in some of these crimes. And when you talk about why that happens in Rutland, the advocates for domestic violence said because there's more trust and legitimacy within your law enforcement agency. People are willing to go to you. So you have to have law enforcement at the table. They don't have to run it. I'm not saying I want to be in charge of this unless I'm told to. But you have to be ready to go, right? You have to be at the table. You have to be part of the process because there is violence in our communities. But I've said this to some of you and I'll say it again. A safe community is more than the absence of violence. There's a lot of things out there that create unsafe communities. And it's not my perception that matters. It's the perception of the person that we will be talking to.
Yeah, I think there's more to explore here. I remembered walking the beat with Commander Prouty. And, but I think there's more to explore in terms of what does that look like in terms of the rollout and the deliverance of this RFP with law enforcement present. So thank you for this. Chief Cooney, do you have answers to my question?
I'll keep it much shorter than he did. But we've had lots of discussions about this and we're both on the same page. And I think that there is a benefit to doing a study of this kind. I think it's going to identify gaps that we all know exist already, but it will highlight some of those things. I mean, both police and fire. I mean, the role of the fire department is generally a reactive agency, right? Respond to crisis, mitigate different kinds of emergencies. We're a mitigation team. That's our design. And I think when we study it, you'll see all the other things that we're doing that we might not be the best resource for. And I think it's going to identify where our gaps are in what services this government is providing and on what holes we need to fill to get them done.
Jim?
I just want to add also that there's been discussion at HCORI about that maybe the terminology just saying community safety assessment is somehow implies that it would be only the public safety department and that it somehow would be critical of police and fire, like and there's absolutely zero intention for that. And so there was even discussion about the potential for calling it a community wellness assessment as opposed to safety. But I mean, I don't have a strong opinion about that, but if there was, in our further discussions, if we decide we want to retitle it, that was an option that came up. I think the Hartford public safety departments are such an example of gold standard in the state of Vermont. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. And it's a matter of, we have been hearing for multiple years fears that people in our community have, and there's not, you can't rationalize someone's feeling, right? You can't say, I've used this example before, like I have an irrational fear of water, and you can tell me all you want that, oh, you shouldn't be afraid of water, you'll be fine, and it doesn't change, so there's other ways that I need to think about how I can feel safe around water. And so that these are potentially ways that will give our town better tools to feel like safe and connected and supported communities. And I have also toured the public safety departments several years ago as well, Rocket, just in case that was me you were referring to, I'm not sure. But I had done that back in like 2019, I think it was. So again,
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Roger?
Yeah, so I am a stubborn man, but I'm always willing to change my mind. And I think my mind's been changed by hearing what you're saying. So I do understand. It's better to hear context coming from the departments in terms of understanding the need. I will say, I think part of my reluctance, and I think this is probably widely shared amongst some of the skeptics in town, is that it does seem to really have been pushed out of HCORI. And when in this meeting, I have pushed for HCORI to be expanded to just HCOE, or just beyond racial equity, but all equity. That to me would make sense, that we would have a community safety study or community wellness study come out of an equity committee. When it comes to the context of coming from the race specific committee, a lot of Americans have associated the defund the police movement with the Black Lives Matter movement. Whether that's fair or not, there was a very strong relationship and coincidence of those two happening. So it can come off. I think there has been a branding maybe misstep even within our own community, including in myself, in my own mind, interpreting a community safety review, especially phrased as a review, or, coming out of the racial equity committee specific, it can be pretty charged. So I think I appreciate what you're saying, Kim, in terms of maybe we need to reframe it. I'm working on reframing that right now, live as we sit here. I appreciate both of what you're saying. And I would say that I pose a question to the board then, because I think Chief Sheldon made a great point, which is that when we say maybe we should do the work, but we being the Hartford community at large, is there a way that we can limit our RFP to organizations in or around Hartford or people in and around Hartford? Because that to me does make way more sense that there is this long-standing pre-existing set of relationships as well as a future commitment. I do have a deep fear of someone coming in from outside, and this is like the New Englander in me, if an outsider coming in, giving us all these expensive recommendations just so that they can stick around until they move on to the next community for the next job. And that is a huge problem for me, because I think that just in being invested in seeing a systemic positive change step by step, that it would be what they did in Rutland was extraordinary. They were on the front page of the New York Times for being a blighted community, and now have really made immense steps forward. So I think that specific piece of wisdom in terms of how do we engage the Hartford community, looking broadly as we as the Hartford community in terms of doing this, is there a possibility, is that even technically possible within our RFP process? And if so, is there support on the board to doing some sort of limiting around that?
If I'm not mistaken, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we need to limit it to Hartford, but isn't there a way that we can give a greater score in the rating process if it is a local business or organization?
Mhm.
I think they can be. So say, for example, if we get 3 proposals and 2 are from outside Hartford and 1 is inside Hartford, and the other 2 are slightly lower cost, we can credit the Hartford business to kind of equalize that. Is that correct?
Are there limits around that? I mean, it sounds like we could just stack the deck, right? I mean, speaking
I
candidly.
don't think it's legal to say we won't hire anyone who's not from here,
Yeah, I mean, and it's not necessarily stacking the deck. It was a way that the board over the years has tried to encourage local,
Right.
be local,
Right.
and having a 5% variance to make sure that local businesses are not, overlooked just because they're outside, within the 5% threshold. So.
Right.
I have a question. I think when it comes down to it for the RFP, it's going to be like how we define the actual proposal, scope of work, things like that. If you get to have recommendations or anything on potential language, I think that's going to help us out. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be this document, which sort of, what we put out, is going to sort of determine, what kind of proposals we get from who. And I think that's the most important thing, is identifying, what the scope is, everything. I mean, there's stuff in here, I mean, certainly this can definitely be a starting point, but yeah, if you've got recommendations, and language, I'm sure the board would be thrilled to take a look at that. Benny?
Yeah, Chief Sheldon, when you did something similar to this Project Vision in Rutland, was it through like surveys, or was it through, how was the data collected to be able to analyze it? What did you use to?
Surveys, yeah, neighborhood surveys. A lot of it was from the actual partners that were doing the work, the social workers, what do they want to address. Example, we had an opioid committee. Obviously, we had an opioid epidemic. 5-7 years later, it was called the non-opioid committee, because the healthcare industry took up the opioid epidemic as a healthcare problem and left alcohol and cocaine type use, other drugs kind of hanging out there. So that whatever you do, it has to be flexible, and it has to be a living document, and it has to be adjusted and reevaluated on a consistent basis. So we did do that, yes.
The only way to evaluate something, though, is to have a value to it. That's the only way you can get a data point in order to drive your qualification or your, to do a NUVA on it for statistical analysis. So that's why I question how everything can be, how everything can have a number associated with it for the survey, whether it's just like people's feelings are not something that we can put a value on. That's why
Not a numerical value, unless you had a chart to go by or sliding rule. But you don't evaluate it from, I wouldn't evaluate it from my standpoint. I would have to evaluate it from the person receiving the services standpoint. Are we reducing the barriers to services that these people want? Do they feel safer in the community? You can put a number on that. There's lots of ways of looking at it and in determining success. Sometimes success is the problem doesn't exist anymore, like the opioid epidemic is still a problem, but it's not as big of a problem, right? We addressed it well and the committee changed the name and focus. So that's how you look at it. We would do strategic planning every so many years. I think they've done 2 or 3 and they're in the process of doing another one. It's a constant revision, and you have to ask not only the providers in the room, but you also have to invite those you're serving. You need their perspective. You need the person who's suffering from some sort of substance use, abuse. You need to invite the homeless or otherwise unhoused to your meetings and talk to them about what they are looking at, because that's often missed in our work. Government work is about numbers, statistics. We forget the human element. The last thing I'll say is, everybody at least has an idea of who Jim Baker is. He's the one that had the idea, the brainchild, the Project Vision, what it was all about. And it's rolling way past, what he originally envisioned. But what he said about these kind of programs is it's got to be grassroots programs. If someone comes in here from, Virginia or Florida and says, this is what you got to do, how much buy-in is there? It's got to be grassroots, and it's got to be from the people who care about the community, not from some company getting paid to provide a product. So I offer that as a just a comment that it's really got to be a grassroots program.
I'm looking at this from a Six Sigma standpoint, because that's where my education says Six Sigma.
Yep.
And in order to have results from Six Sigma, you have to have decent data to go into this and make it thought. Yeah, that's why I say everything's got to have a number attached to it. Unfortunately, it's got to have a number in order to analyze it.
Well, a lot of the numbers you look at, unfortunately, from my standpoint, would be crime numbers. Now, from the medical industry, it might be a different number. From the social work industry, it might be an even different number. What they look at is different than what I look at. So what I can tell you is this: a lot of the petty crimes are committed by people who are struggling. So that we are arresting somebody who's really, it's a symptom. The crime is a symptom of an underlying cause. So until you address that underlying cause, whether it be substance use disorder, mental health, traumatic incident in their past, creating a mental health problem, something, if we don't address that, you're never going to have crime rates go down. You're never going to have addiction drop. You're not going to have less and less homelessness in your communities. You have to address that. I respond to symptoms of some of these social problems, which is crime. How do you reduce crime? You attack the problem, not a symptom. And we in society tend to attack the symptom. Arrest, arrest, arrest. We're not going to arrest your way out of these things. We need our state legislators. I'm going to get back on my soapbox, but they need to give us more money for mental health and drug addiction and alcohol addiction. That's where we need to help. But this can identify those needs. We can work with our partners, and then there's grant money. There's a lot of things you can work on once we identify them.
So how do we move forward with this as a board?
Anyone want to answer a lady's question? And Kim,
Yeah.
and Dale?
I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking a question.
Well, I think moving forward is having these discussions and coming up with ways that what we want to put in the RFP. So we're not going to solve anything today. Tonight was just the first beginning, having the discussions and putting it out there.
Yeah.
So I think coming back together, in 2 weeks, it'll give everybody the opportunity to think about what we've talked about tonight. Also, we're hopeful, community members will reach out to us, whether they reach out to the select board, reach out to any of us. And then if they're not able to be here, we can bring it back. And so this is starting that hard discussion that nobody wanted to have. And so that's where
Can we get something like the Project Vision questions or surveys, the points that they use, so we can tailor our around that?
I just may be the best friend of the guy who did it, so I might be able to contact.
Kim?
I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of methodology, and I don't know if it was from which group, but one example, like coming up with what those surveys are, something I would imagine would be the work of a consultant, but that there was one methodology that involved the consultant asking regional nonprofit partners if they would be willing to commit to have one of their staff to volunteer, I think it was 10 hours a month. And that, so basically you've got the consultant, you've got the town staff, and you've got maybe 8 to 10 volunteer members who are stakeholders in the community in the service sector, and that the consultant is training them in trauma-informed interviews so that everyone is on the same page and knows these are the ways, and this is what you will ask, and this is how you collect the information, and these are the ways that it will be sensitive to meeting the person where they're at, however you're approaching it. So there becomes like a methodology for the process, and then it goes out, and then the information is collected and synthesized.
Done correctly, this could be invaluable to our town. Done incorrectly, it could just be a solution in search of a problem. So we have to avoid that.
Yeah, so I think that.
One hand that's up.
Okay, one hand. Well, let's bring them over.
Marie, go ahead.
Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous here. Anyway, my opinion is I don't feel we need to spend $50,000 to do this. And I think a survey, we can come up with the questions, we can identify the problems. I mean, I think we really kind of know what most of them are. I think that we need to have these organizations, as well, the Haven, of course, supply us with data on people as to like where they're coming from and whatnot, because I feel they are providing services way beyond just Hartford and Lebanon and Hanover. And by requiring the data, then we have the information of what we need, number of police calls to Hartford Avenue, number of police calls to the Haven, emergency services, et cetera, the cost. I think we can find out a lot of information by doing our own survey with our own questions. And if we need help after that, then maybe that's the next step after that. Those are just my thoughts, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Marie.
I'd like to respond to that, Mike.
Lanny, yep.
Yeah, Marie, I appreciate your input on this. I'm gonna stop this thing. One of the things that we need to take away from the discussion is the focus on the Haven now. We cannot make the Haven or homelessness in our community the center of a survey. There's so much more in our community that we need to address, and still the Haven, but we cannot make the Haven the center of our discussion. With that said, I don't know if we have the talent within, maybe we do, maybe we have the talent within town to be able to ask the right questions. But that's why I would love to see something from Rutland to see what kind of questions they asked, to be able to garner those people that are disenfranchised and the people that are not heard from as much as they should be.
Well, you know, I know that the Haven, it can't be brought up. That's what it is for me, because that's where the crime rate. I think if you look at the crime rate in the town of Hartford, you will find that Hartford Avenue is the #1 crime area. So that is data to look at as well. I think we can look at our own data. I agree, it can't all be about the homeless. And these homeless issues need to be addressed. They're just going to grow. And it's not that I don't want to help them. The mental health issue is an issue. And one thing that happened, I can't swear it happened, but I saw that gentleman walk to Cumbies, or while I was out raking my lawn or whatever I was doing out in my garden. And then about 10 minutes later, I saw 2 high school boys, and they were either yelling or pointing. I couldn't see if it was him. They were doing it too, because I was at my house. If that continued, I would have gone down to see, but they did stop. And if they were antagonizing and harassing him, and he's got mental issues, that's a problem. My fear on Hartford Avenue is the kids interacting with these people. That's my fear.
Yeah,
And
thank you, Marie.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we've had our first meeting on this, kind of rolled it out. We have a lot of questions, a lot of sort of comment we've heard from the public, and I think that's good. The next meeting, we'll start it up earlier and we'll invite the public to come and give us their thoughts on this. We're getting the input from the staff. It sounds like the two chiefs are in favor of this concept. And I think they'll be able to help us work on sort of narrowing or properly identifying the scope of work for the RFP. So like, you know, we got a meeting, next meeting on this, the 16th, and then hopefully by the 30th, you know, we'll have something we can all agree on to issue. So thanks everybody for coming down and speaking with us. And we'll probably see a lot of you over the next couple meetings. So thank you. Okay, so commission reports. Lanny, you want to start us off? You got any?
I have nothing. My meetings are conflicted, so.
Okay, Rocket?
No.
Dan? Tim? Oh, I skipped Ally. I'll go back to you, Ally.
Go ahead, Ally.
Oh, sure. Yep, I do have a few. So Resilient Hartford, there's work being done on a rain gutter system to support irrigation for the Clifford Park Food Forest, and the growing team is planning work outing in the coming weeks. So awesome work with that committee. And also want to remind folks that there are 2 open committee seats on Resilient Hartford. Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion. The committee was talking about different topics, each core related topics that can be part of the joint school board and select board meeting, and the possibility of kind of a late May date. So those conversations are ongoing to keep that planning happening. They also discussed the public information officer position, and if there's opportunity for the committee to support drafting a job description. And they're still working on a resolution to honor late committee and community member Ann Reynolds, and a reminder that there is 1 open committee seat on each quarry. And then Hartford Committee on Housing and Homelessness, it's continuing to revise its work plan, categorizing it into short, medium, and long-term goals and work areas. And also doing a lot of kind of resource gathering and really understanding what other local housing groups are working on, what the successes and challenges have been, and how that can inform the the work and the complement the charge of this committee's work moving forward. So the group is working to kind of do info gathering and actually figure out a way to actually input into some sort of database or logging system. So, we as a town can have that institutional knowledge as we do our work moving forward. That's all for me.
Thank you, Ally. Kim?
Mine, just town manager search committee, Gabrielle Luke gave kind of an update on the listening sessions, and then also Dominic Cloud from VLCT has been doing some outreach to stakeholders as well, and should have some preliminary profile and marketing materials ready to share with us at the next meeting on March 11th. And in addition to the listening sessions, there should be, hopefully by the end of this week, released an electronic survey that we can all spread around to also get further input from people who weren't able to attend the listening sessions on what they would like to see for characteristics and strengths, et cetera, of town manager.
Great. I don't have anything, but I did mention I'm willing to be the liaison to sister cities, so unless there's an objection, I'll do it.
What's the historic preservation?
And we need someone for historic preservation as well. So think about it. I might be able to take that one too. We'll see. Okay, so consent agenda. I will take a motion.
I have questions on that.
Oh, okay. Questions, Lanny, on consent agenda?
Sure. So you asked about getting fuel at Evans. The reason why departments were getting fuel at Evans is because the police department actually had a surge in repairs at for their vehicles, and they were uncertain whether or not it was related to the fuel. And so rather than have every vehicle in the town of Hartford be out of service, they went and got it from Evans, and Evans is our provider, and they provided it at the same price that we receive it at
That's
GPW. You had a question about a repair for a loader and whether or not our on-site technician or mechanic was qualified to do it or should go and get additional training. This particular part, they troubleshooted it and it was required for CAT to actually come and put their software on it. That software is not available to the public. So regardless of how well-trained the mechanic would be, it was still required the software for the piece of machinery, and it was determined that a part needed to be replaced. As far as the legal part goes, the description was in there. Charter changes would have reached out to the attorney looking for advice there. And then as far as the excuse me?
But what are the questions that are being asked to the, I mean, we had a charter committee, so the question is, are the charter committee recommendations being brought before the attorney to be reviewed, or is staff trying to make up changes for the charter that?
Well, we actually, the charter committee actually reached out to the attorney and themselves, and we actually didn't know about it until after the fact. So when the earlier discussions were going on regarding the charter changes, there was a lot of communication with the attorney regarding the charter.
So are we still going to the attorney for changes?
There's nothing happening with the charter right now. It's been tabled until a further date that is being discussed at the board. These charges were happening when all of the charter discussion was happening.
Okay, all right.
And then as far as the cannabis goes, that had to do with the park.
Okay.
For the ordinance for utilizing cannabis in any of the parks in town. And
That's
then
illegal for wood.
Excuse me?
The legal for wood, is that the?
Yeah, I was getting to
Okay.
it. And that had to do with a public records request.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I think that covered all of them.
Yeah.
The only thing I do want to change is make sure when you're reading the consent agenda, when you approve the AP manifest, it's for the period of 4/28/2023 and also 5/4/2023. And I'll make sure that I follow up with Lana to make sure that going forward that the dates are correct, because it's important that it's the date that the checks are issued and payroll is released. And those are the two dates that always go together.
Okay, I'll take a motion. Dan?
Let's make a motion to approve payroll ending 4/29/2023, approve meeting minutes of 4/18/2023, approve the AP manifest of 4/28/2023 and 5/4/2023.
Well, second.
We have a second, any discussion?
I did, thank you.
I have a question though, because a resident was here during public comment and had asked for a change on the meeting minutes. And so I just wanted, before, I don't know if you decided to make that amendment or not going to make it.
Kim? Oh, you had your hand up.
I did.
Okay.
Okay, so we were thinking that the change could be made on tonight's meeting minutes to make the correction.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that it didn't.
Anyone
Okay.
object to that?
No.
Just review
got
the
it, Lynn?
tape and make sure it's,
Yeah, we can do it on tonight's.
Okay.
I would review the videotape and make sure what he's saying is accurate. That's, review the videotape and make sure what he's saying is accurate for the changes.
So we have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. All those in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Okay. All right, we're on to executive session. I don't think it'll take too long. I'll take a motion to go into it.
Mr. Chair, I would move that the select board finding that premature general public knowledge of current litigation will clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage by disclosing litigation details, as well as to discuss current, oh wait.
You have to go two separately.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so I move the select board move into executive session to find that premature general public knowledge of current litigation will clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage by disclosing litigation details.
Okay, do I have a second?
A second.
Daniel, second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And so do this one now. And Mr. Chair, I'd also move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss current litigation under the provisions of 1 BSA 313A1 and to discuss the evaluation of a public employee under 1 BSA or employees under 1 BSA 313A3.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, a second, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna be in executive session.
Ally, do you want me to call you? Or-
Yes, please.
Are we back? Okay, I'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Got a second?
I'll second.
So a second from Dan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so.
Yeah, sure.
We have.
He was voting
We have
yes.
no action to take based on our executive session, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second from Dan. All those in favor say aye.
Yeah.
Aye.
I got it.
All right, we are adjourned.